Many of you know, several years ago, the World Wrestling Federation and I came under a vicious attack by the tabloid media, led by one Phil Mushnick of the New York Post. It's been the equivalent, in my view, of journalistic stalking. As we found out, these stalkers apparently are not interested in the truth, as they have been heard to say in the tabloid newsroom, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
The one thing you have, as far as I'm concerned, the most valuable thing a person owns, the most valuable thing a man can own in your life is your name.
Yeah.
Period. It's your name. And now, his great-grandfather, his grandfather, his father, that name is, it's done and dusted. I mean, it's ruined.
Anytime that you're at that level and that you have that much power, I think you're going to see things like that happen, and people take advantage of their power.
Someone that must have like such a hunger for power that they need to control someone, and that's about Vince. I can't say everyone else that was mentioned would surprise me quite as much.
What do you think overall about Vince McMahon?
Plain and simple, he's a piece of shit.
This is the company that he created, that he founded. And he wanted to make sure in his retirement that he thanked all of you. He thanked the WWE Universe. You guys you're jumping me. I'm trying to get there. I'm trying to get there.
Vince McMahon is often regarded as the most influential person in the history of wrestling, and the man who made it what it is today.
As a TV pioneer, he went from selling costume superheroes like Hulk Hogan to dark anti-heroes like Steve Austin. He helped give birth to reality television by making himself a central character, and he launched The Rock into a movie career. No one in television can match his longevity. Few have his instincts for what sells.
So the question remains, what went wrong with Vince McMahon, and at what point do successful business practices turn into forms of abuse? Vincent Kennedy McMahon was born on August 24th, 1945 in Pinehurst, North Carolina, to father Vincent James McMahon and mother Victoria. However, when he was just a baby, his father, Vince Sr., completely abandoned the family. Vince Jr. was raised by his single mother and a variety of stepfathers, using one of their surnames, growing up as Vinnie Lupton. He would later claim that his stepfather Leo Lupton would violently assault his mother in front of him, and if he attempted to protect her, he would then turn his attack towards him.
It is unfortunate that Lupton died before I could kill him. I would have enjoyed that.
It was in 1957 when Vince would finally meet his biological father. His granddad was boxing promoter Roderick James McMahon, and subsequently Vince Sr. was the promoter of Capital Wrestling Corporation, which naturally led to Vince Jr. wanting to follow in his footsteps.
And I love my dad very much. And, stepping through the ropes, I could feel his presence. It was a good thing. Still do today.
It was in 1961 when Vince met 13-year-old Linda Edwards, and the two would soon form a relationship, with him becoming a frequent visitor at her home, becoming acquainted with her family relatively quickly.
Your mother lived in the poor section of town, and let me tell you, your mother's family never lived up to the station of the McMahon family. Never. Not even close. Nonetheless, I admit I was attracted to her. I admit that. But there may have been a reason for that too. You see, your mother had a certain reputation.
Oh boy.
You might say she had a good time girl reputation, if you get my drift. Okay, so let me set the stage for you just to show you the kind of human being your mother is, all right? On the very first date, Stephanie, on the very first date, we had a really good time.
People misunderstand Mr. McMahon and Vince McMahon. It's a lot easier to bitch at somebody and knock them as Mr. McMahon than understand the human being that is Vince McMahon.
During this time, Vince was in Havelock High School, but this became one of the first in the entire state to integrate both black and white students together. According to Abraham Reisman's novel Ringmaster, Vince McMahon and the Unmaking of America, in which the author interviewed several people close to McMahon during his upbringing, Vince reportedly hated the school and demanded to rebel in order to be kicked out and moved to military school instead. Though there's no definitive evidence that any of this was racially motivated, it does call into question certain things done and said in the WWE in the years that followed.
But Shelton Benjamin is not one of us. And he never, ever will be. And why? Well, because Shelton Benjamin is not white.
Truth be told, I'm not a very big fan of the black people.
I see sand people. The only place that you three belong is the hood where you came from.
Somebody like you doesn't get to be a world champion.
What's good in the hood?
Just hold it down, try to take care of business.
Keep it up, I'm a nigga.
Though McMahon struggled with dyslexia, he did end up graduating from Fishburne Military School in Waynesboro, Virginia in 1964. But his heart always remained in the wrestling business. He would often accompany his father on trips to New York's Madison Square Garden, and he truly wanted to become a professional wrestler, but Vince Sr. completely forbade this from happening. At the time, wrestling promoters never actually appeared on the show itself, and Vince Sr. was adamant that the promoters and wrestlers should always be kept separate, as that is the way it had always been. On August 26, 1966, Vince McMahon Jr. married Linda Edwards in New Bern, North Carolina, when she was just 18 years old. And 2 years later, he would graduate from East Carolina University with a business degree. He would spend a short stint as a traveling salesman, but was determined to gain a new managerial role in his father's new promotion, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. It was in 1969 when he made his debut as a ring announcer for his father's All-Star Wrestling, but this was all by accident. Ray Morgan was due to appear instead, but he had a dispute with Vince Sr. about his pay, and instead of giving in to his demands, the older McMahon simply let him walk and gave the spot to his son. On January the 15th, 1970, Linda gave birth to their first child Shane in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and a year later Vince was assigned to a small territory in Maine where he promoted his first ever wrestling card, and even took on the role of a play-by-play commentator for televised matches, a role that he would maintain for decades. In fact, in 1976, Vince was actually responsible for the bout between Muhammad Ali and Antonio Inoki, and on September the 24th that year, Linda gave birth to their second child, Stephanie, in Hartford, Connecticut. It was in 1979 when he managed to persuade his father to rename his company to the World Wrestling Federation. But he and his wife Linda weren't just sold on this one revenue, as they decided to make some more business decisions, purchasing Cape Cod Coliseum as well as the Cape Cod Buccaneers of the Atlantic Coast Hockey League, which they used to sell out several concerts. On February the 21st, 1980, Vince McMahon Jr. founded Titan Sports, and its company's HQ was then established in South Yarmouth, Massachusetts, with Vince himself becoming chairman and Linda the co-chief executive. It was 2 years on when Vince McMahon Sr.'s health began to deteriorate, leading to his son and Titan Sports now gaining control of Capital Wrestling Corporation, which in turn also gave him the World Wrestling Federation. This was a time when the wrestling business was run by several regional promotions, who all mutually vowed to never invade each other's territories. This was a practice that went untouched for decades, but Vince Jr. had other plans. He wanted to expand his company on a national scale and promote it outside of their own allocated territory. He would later admit that if his father had any idea what he had planned, he would have never given him control of the company.
Your father went around the country and shook the hand of every, you know I'm telling the truth, don't you? You know in your heart I'm telling you the truth, that your father shook the hand of every promoter in this country and swore to them that he'd never compete against them, that his son would never compete against them. And when your father died, you competed. And with your ruthless, merciless, take no prisoners attitude, you drove everybody out of business, didn't you, Vince? You ran all the competition into the ground and you stole all their ideas and you made yourself a billionaire out of it.
In 1983, the WWF split away from the affiliated National Wrestling Alliance, and the McMahons relocated to Greenwich, Connecticut, setting up their WWF headquarters in Stamford. On May the 24th, 1984, Vince McMahon Sr. sadly passed away from pancreatic cancer at the age of 69. And it was now when his son would go against his wishes and take the company mainstream.
Unfortunately, my dad recently, as many of you know, just several weeks ago passed away. But if ever there was one individual who carried the banner of Madison Square Garden, no one quite did it like my dad.
The hype leading up to the match is very carefully choreographed. Vince McMahon literally looks upon that hype the same way the producer of Dynasty or Dallas looks at his screenplay. They have one man who sits in a room year-round and writes scenarios 6 months in advance for what's going to happen leading up to these matches.
You don't see knives, you don't see guns, you don't see rapes, you don't see anything at all like that that's portrayed in anything that we do. It's a very wholesome, family-oriented environment.
Vince brought in megastars like Hulk Hogan, but also began introducing celebrities to the wrestling world, such as Mr. T or Cyndi Lauper, to expand their fan base into a national mainstream audience, bringing non-wrestling fans interest to the product, to the point they were frequently featured on MTV. He attempted to reach family audiences, attracting fans who didn't previously pay much attention to wrestling, using pay-per-view events to promote their storylines and other supercards for less popular shows to increase interest and revenue. On March the 31st, 1985, the WWF featured their first ever WrestleMania, which was shown through various different markets throughout the United States. And the WWF was now a force to be reckoned with. But behind closed doors, there may have been something a lot more sinister at work. On July the 16th, 1986, Rita Chatterton, the first ever female referee in WWF history, claimed that Vince McMahon attempted to force her to perform oral sex on him inside his limousine. But when she refused, the chairman of the company raped her.
The first day that I had met Vince McMahon, the first day in his office.
Vince McMahon is
the owner of the WWF.
There he is, a familiar face to anyone with a TV.
Yeah, Vince McMahon, what Vince says goes. That's the way it is.
Nice dimple, Vince.
I was offered a $500,000 a year contract. I was told that I was going to be so big, my name would be a household item. Everyone would know who I was. His exact words were, how are you going to feel the first time you walk past a newsstand and see your face on the cover of Time magazine? I mean, he just blew it up to be so unbelievable, you know? But I knew it was possible because I was a novelty. I was the only female. I was getting less and less work. I'd try to call the Federation, try calling Vince to find out why, and I could never get through to him. I knew the only way that I could really get to Vince was to go to Poughkeepsie, which at the time is where they filmed all the television matches.
Poughkeepsie in upstate New York?
In upstate New York, yeah. I went to Poughkeepsie. I seen Vince in the hall. I had asked him if I could speak with him. He told me at that point that he was really busy, but after the matches to follow him to a restaurant. There's a Greek diner a few miles up the road, and I did. I got to the diner. Vince was there, his limo driver, 4 or 5 cameramen, other people, and myself were sitting at a big round table. They were talking what they were going to put on the show that week, what they were going to cut, a lot of technical things that I really didn't know anything about. When it seemed as though they were done talking, I brought up my career with Vince and asked, what was going to happen here. And Vince just kind of looked at me, put his finger up to his mouth and kind of did a, hush hush. So, of course, I did. I mean, Vince is he's it. He makes you or breaks you. A few minutes later, I went into the ladies' room. When I come out into the corridor of the ladies' room, Vince was standing there. Told me that he definitely wanted to talk to me about my career. Said that he definitely neglected doing something with me at this point. And that he wanted me to follow him because he didn't want to talk there at the diner. There were quite a few people from the Federation there. It made sense. I can understand that. We left there. I followed Vince over to a Denny's in a parking lot. I got out of my car, walked to the front of the car. Vince's driver got out and opened the door, and I thought Vince was going to get out. But instead, Vince said to me, "No, Rita, come in here." He says, "We just sat in a diner for a couple hours. I really don't want coffee." He says, "We'll just sit and talk here." We're sitting in a parking lot. I mean, I didn't think much of it. I got in the limo with him. We got into the limo. Vince started talking about magazines, T-shirts, wrestling dolls. We don't have a referee doll at this point. A female would be great. On and on and on. Again, starts talking about a $500,000 a year contract. Next thing I know, Vince McMahon is unzipping his pants. I was pretty shocked at that point. I mean, we're talking profession here, and suddenly he wants more than just profession. Vince continued to, if you want a $500,000 contract, you're going to have to satisfy me, and this is the way things have to go. Vince grabbed my hand, kept trying to put my hand on him. I was scared. My wrist, at the end, my wrist was all purple, black and blue. Things just didn't, he just didn't stop. This man just didn't stop, a $500,000 a year contract. How's your daughter going to go to college? Of course, she doesn't have to go to college. I was forced into oral sex with Vince McMahon. When I couldn't complete his desires, he got really angry, started ripping off my jeans, pulled me on top of him, and told me again, if I wanted a $500,000 a year contract, I had to satisfy him. He could make me or break me, and if I didn't satisfy him, I was blackballed. That was it. I was done. When Vince was all said and done, Vince just sat back and said, at one point when I first met Vince, let me back up here just a little bit. The very first time I met Vince, I was told that if I had any sexual relationships with anyone in the Federation, I was done. My career was done. I was engaged. I had no problem with that. When Vince was said and done, Vince looked at me and said, "Do you remember what I told you about having sexual relationships with anyone? Well, you just did." And he just sat back and had this big smile and this big grin and just started laughing at me.
Not long after this accusation, Rita was fired from the WWF, though one source claims that she actually resigned. She did remain a licensed referee for a while, so the New York State Athletic Commission actually sent her to work some more WWF events, but she refused to do any shows that she knew Vince would be attending.
I held off for a long time because of my parents. Both of my parents were very ill. My mother died a year ago. My father died 2 weeks ago. Between not having to worry about my parents' health and with other people coming forward, God, I just hope somebody listens.
The legal issues would only continue with WWF commentator Jesse the Body Ventura. Initially, he was informed that only the wrestling performers were liable for royalties regarding the company's video sales, but this wasn't actually the case. He wouldn't discover this until years later, leading to him filing a lawsuit against Titan Sports for fraud, demanding $2 million. Titan actually took this to court, but they lost, and Ventura was given $801,333 as well as an additional $8,625 in back pay. On March the 29th, 1987, the WWF held their third annual WrestleMania and drew the biggest crowd in sports entertainment history at the time, with 93,173 attending the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan. This was a time when wrestling was still considered real to the public, so Vince was never actually acknowledged as being the chairman. To the fans, he was nothing more than an on-screen commentator, while Jack Tunney was portraying the president of the WWF. But things were about to get much worse for the business. George Zahorian III was the company's physician from Philadelphia, and he had provided them with several supplies of illegal anabolic steroids. It was in 1989 when Linda McMahon sent a memo to executive Pat Patterson requesting him to contact Zahorian to fire him, and she even warned him of a potential impending legal battle.
Although you and I discussed before our continuing to have Zahorian at our events as the doctor on call, I think that is now not a good idea. Vince agreed and would like for you to call Zahorian and to tell him not to come to any more of our events, and to also clue him in on any action that the Justice Department is thinking of taking.
Regardless of a possible impending legal battle, Vince was undeterred and still formed the World Bodybuilding Federation in 1990. Just as Linda had predicted, in 1991, Dr. George Zahorian was arrested, and the WWF were going to be investigated on the grounds of providing their talent with illegal steroids. During this entire trial, Vince closed down his short-lived bodybuilding federation in 1992. It was on April the 3rd that year when Rita Chatterton was approached by Geraldo Rivera to discuss the previous rape allegations towards the chairman of the WWF 6 years earlier. This led to her taking the accusation public for the first time, but there wasn't a whole lot of coverage regarding it due to the steroid scandal taking place at the same time, as well as a variety of other WWF wrestlers also being accused of sexual abuse.
Rita, if it really happened, why did you wait?
Well, I can't answer her question as far as the Mets and what happened there.
No, but I want you to speak for yourself on the question of delay.
What happened with me is, at that time, you people don't understand wrestling. Nobody talks, for one. No one talks. It's a complete hush-hush world. I did go to see an attorney. I was told at that time that basically this was going to come down to my word against his because I had no proof. I had to weigh that. At the time, my mother was on oxygen 24 hours a day. My dad had a bad heart. And I didn't think either one of my parents could have been put through it, especially at that time where no one was opening up. Everything was so quiet.
Regardless, Vince denied the allegations and actually sued Chatterton, Rivera, and the producers of the show for defamation. The steroid trial wouldn't begin until November 1993. And it nearly ended the WWF for good. The trial revealed that Zahorian had supplied steroids to the WWF and their wrestlers directly to Vince McMahon's office at the headquarters in Connecticut. 11 wrestlers testified, but only one claimed that they had actually been pressured by Vince to take steroids, which was the wrestler known as Nails. However, he had been fired previously by McMahon and had even had a physical altercation with him. He also often contradicted his own claims, from stating that he had no animosity towards Vince to admitting to completely hating the guy. So it was concluded that he was merely out for revenge, and his claims were dismissed. Hulk Hogan, who was now wrestling for the competition WCW, claimed that Vince never provided him any steroids. He claimed that he had only taken some previously for medical purposes, and that Zahorian had delivered them to him with his fan mail and paychecks, but was adamant that McMahon had nothing to do with it. However, the court looked at the sheer size of the talent at the time, and concluded that most of the roster were taking them. It was believed that Vince was not only in charge of distributing the drugs to his wrestlers, but that he even made it a requirement to be a part of the company. It was even concluded that Vince was using the company money to purchase the illegal steroids, and he was even indicted for this, being charged with conspiring to distribute steroids and the possession of illegal steroids with the intent to distribute. After being indicted, Vince dropped the lawsuit against Rita Chatterton. His lawyer claimed that McMahon only ever had one discussion with Zahorian about steroids, but it was only over his concerns about the health of his wrestlers. Vince even admitted to using steroids himself in the past, but only before they had become illegal in 1991 under the Controlled Substances Act. Regardless, after 16 hours of deliberation, Vince McMahon was still found not guilty.
Gentlemen, is that the best you can do?
However, Zahorian was charged and sentenced to 3 years in prison, but once released, he would continue to practice medicine in the years that followed. Vince claimed that the company was completely drug-free, but due to this case, he introduced a tough, independent drug testing policy and claimed that any wrestler caught with drugs would be let go, which actually happened with superstar Crush just a year later. Vince would go on to even brag about WWF's drug testing policy, as his competition WCW didn't have one in place. But despite coming out on top in the trial, things still weren't looking good for the business. Due to the controversy, Vince decided to begin promoting his smaller wrestlers instead, but he was beginning to lose ratings to WCW, and the business began to severely suffer. It was that same year when Rita Chatterton's good friend Andre the Giant sadly passed away, which ultimately led to her stepping away from the wrestling world altogether. Andre had been struggling with his health for years, especially with all of the traveling, but to make matters worse, he reportedly hated it when Vince decided to turn him heel, a term in the wrestling world for a bad guy. Andre had a lot of young fans and he loved interacting with them, but with this new creative decision it was taken away from him and he wasn't able to do this anymore, adding to his continuing grief towards the end of his life.
I have a facility to get rid of negatives very quickly, and if something hurts me, I get rid of it.
It was in 1994 when the legal issues continued, when Titan Sports entered a dispute with the Worldwide Fund for Nature, which had also been using the name WWF since March 1979. Vince agreed to stop using the written acronym if they dropped all legal proceedings against the full name World Wrestling Federation and their current logo, which was agreed. However, Vince didn't stick to this agreement. In 2000, the Worldwide Fund sued Vince and his company for violating their deal, specifically in their merchandising, forcing them to change the name years later. The WWF attempted to introduce more adult-oriented content to appeal to a wider audience, but it was in 1996 when they finally, for the first time in history, started to expose Vince McMahon on television as being the chairman of the company.
The egotistical owner of the World Wrestling Federation. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Vince McMahon couldn't stand the competition. This is bullshit.
Oh, we apologize, ladies and
screw
gentlemen.
me, everybody screws me, and nobody does a goddamn thing about it. Nobody in the building cares, nobody in the dressing room cares. So much goddamn injustice around here, I've had it up to here.
However, Vince McMahon's leadership of this huge corporation was soon called into question when several members under the WWF name were facing legal issues. Jimmy Superfly Snuka was one of the most popular wrestlers in history, but on May the 10th, 1983, just a few hours after competing at a WWF televised event in Allentown, Pennsylvania, he called for an ambulance as his girlfriend Nancy Argentino had allegedly been injured. She was 23 years old and died of traumatic brain injuries, which they found were consistent with a moving head being struck with a stationary object. She had 24 cuts and bruises on her head, ear, chin, arms, hands, back, buttocks, legs and feet, which they believed were all a sign of domestic abuse. The pathologist who conducted the autopsy claimed that this should be a murder investigation until proven otherwise. To make matters worse, Snuka had actually been arrested 4 months earlier for beating the same girlfriend and then fighting off several police officers. Nancy originally pressed charges, but according to the police, Vince McMahon talked her out of pressing them. Despite this evidence, Snuka continued to work within the company for decades, even being inducted into the Hall of Fame and being heavily promoted as a legend, before finally being arrested on September the 1st, 2015, 32 years later. However, Snuka's health severely declined, and he ended up passing away from a terminal illness at the age of 73, having never faced justice. The aforementioned Pat Patterson worked as an executive for the company, as well as an on-screen talent in the early years, and he was also the first openly homosexual professional wrestler. During the 1960s, amidst the outbreak of homophobic panic in the United States, the Justice Department's Immigration and Naturalization Service actually spent years trying to find evidence of any homosexual activity surrounding Patterson to find an excuse to deport him back home to Canada. Patterson frequently attended gay parties and visited gay bars, even picking up male prostitutes in the Portland area. He was heavily interviewed and questioned about being gay, and even accused of molesting little boys. And by 1966, he was given a deportation notice, but he fought against it and won, being given a green card in 1971. Once retiring from in-ring action, Patterson worked as a road agent and Vince McMahon's right-hand man. It was in the early 90s when ring announcer Murray Hodgson began work with the company, signing a 2-year contract. But regardless, this was violated and he was released just a few weeks later.
I was fired in mid-August of '91, after I refused a sexual advancement from Vince McMahon's buddy, the vice president of operations.
Pat Patterson.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What happened?
We were at an event at the Worcester Arena, and he had come up to me and he said, "So you're the new guy. What do you taste like?" And I was really put back by it. And I told him that he had the wrong guy. And then he told me candidly that not if I wanted to keep my job with him, I didn't. And he kept his word. 2 weeks later, I was fired.
Do you believe that sexual harassment exists in your workplace?
I believe that there's a possibility of sexual harassment existing everywhere. And
I asked directly if it was in the World Wrestling Federation.
I don't want it in my organization. I don't want it.
I'd like to reiterate the question. Do you believe there is sexual harassment amongst the wrestlers or employees of the World Wrestling Federation today?
There is a possibility of that. That's why I have these independent investigators to come in.
And who are these independent investigators?
Fairfax Group Limited. And I would like, to hear what you have to say, and everyone has to say. I want to get to the bottom of it.
There is no question Vince not only knew it was going on, but it certainly wouldn't be a surprise or any shock that he was involved himself.
Did he cover up? And did he take part?
Would you therefore believe that because of all these allegations coming forward and more corroborating evidence proving that there's no doubt sexual harassment is running rampant in the World Wrestling Federation, that you are definitely going to come public and do something about it?
Why wouldn't I? If in fact that is the case, why wouldn't I do something about it? Why would I risk what we have?
Because you haven't done anything about it until it became public, because you thought it was under the water.
Because I had no knowledge of it.
I made knowledge of it to you when I was fired, and you just blew it off and let me go. I retained a lawyer.
Because you were not very good. You were not a very good announcer. You could not. It's the only reason why you were fired. You could not make the transition from radio to television. That is the only reason why you were fired.
I would like to remind you, sir, that I have a 2-year contract. 2 years.
You also have a clause in your contract that states, and as you know, you were hired on a trial basis.
I was not hired on a trial basis.
You do not have a contract?
Mr. McMahon, I have a 2-year deal with your firm.
In that contract, you will note, in a clause, it states very clearly, and I have it outlined for all to see here today, that you can be fired almost at whim, if in fact you're not doing a good job. You did a horrible job. That's the only reason why you were fired. That's it.
Maybe I should point out, first and foremost, that might be your inability to pick good talent.
It could be.
You had a national talent search, Vince McMahon.
Could be.
You advertised in Billboard magazine and across many different media sources, searching for one man that could be the new face and voice of the World Wrestling Federation. You flew me in back and forth 4 and 5 different times from Detroit, and you chose over the course of 1 year of negotiations that I would be the man for that job. I didn't sleep with your vice president. 2 weeks later, I'm fired. I also want to point out one very important fact. From your office came a letter to my landlord to verify my employment. From that letter, I must bring this point up. It says, Murray Hodgson has a very secure job with Titan Sports and is a positive and productive employee. From your office. Just because I don't sleep with your vice president, that qualifies to blow me out of a 2-year deal? I don't buy it.
Vince McMahon found out about this scandal before it had an opportunity to get to court.
I really don't know what to make of it. If in fact these allegations against Pat Patterson, whom you won't name, are true, why not pursue the legal course, the legal recourse? Why not pursue?
We are doing that right now.
You are. And you are aware that you waited 6 months after you were let go to bring these homosexual charges against Pat Patterson. 6 months you waited. Why?
September 14th.
If in fact you were fired on the spot, if you were fired for incompetence, all right, Why didn't you say right then? Why didn't you say, hey, look, Vince, your vice president made a pass at me. You never told me that. No one had any knowledge. Human resources had no knowledge of that. Rene Dubose was waiting to hear your story. Why did you wait 6 months? You asked me for $160,000 today, otherwise you were coming on this program. I'm happy you're on this program.
Mr. McMahon, do not try to deflect the truth here. First and
What are you
foremost,
asking for? How much money have you asked for?
I have never asked for any amount of money from you. You have tried to buy me off to shut up so I wouldn't come forward and tell of these allegations that's running through the World Wrestling Federation.
Your attorney should be consulted.
My attorney, on September of 1991, came forward to you with a letter addressed to you, telling you exactly what happened and that I was discharged wrongfully. I had a 2-year contract and that you too were well aware of the fact that there was a homosexual advance made against me. Don't tell me I waited 6 months. 3 weeks later, I was on your rear end.
Why would I condone this kind of activity and risk this alleged kind of revenue?
Because Vince, when they fired me, I told them in my meeting. I told them straight out, Vince, your vice president came on to me at the Worcester Arena. I know this is the reason why you're firing me. He cut me off abruptly. He didn't want to talk to me. He didn't want to address the issue. He felt I was just some little peon who was just going to get kicked under the rug like everybody else who didn't do what Vince McMahon wanted them to do.
The only reason we waited a little longer was because you continued to try to negotiate to buy me out, and I wouldn't allow it.
The fact of the matter is, if you look into this man's past, the fact of the matter, if you look into your
I don't think we should bring up the past.
I guess not.
The issue at hand here, Mr. McMahon, is one thing and one thing only. You addressed on Larry King Live Friday on CNN. You went on and you said that I never worked for the World Bodybuilding Federation. I am on a video that is sold around worldwide.
True, your
my
voice.
So you told the country that I didn't work for the World Wrestling Federation.
You weren't
say
you
were a freelance and you were hired. Well, of course not. But you weren't. Second of all, you said you fired me. You didn't fire me. John Filippelli not only gave me the letter, but he also fired me. John felt so bad that I was being released that he allowed me to stay at his house if I wanted to and be with his family until I could find further place to live.
And that's, my friend, speaks to all of the good deeds and good people throughout the World Wrestling Federation. We're talking about 3 people here. We're talking about 3 people, and only 3 people that have brought these allegations against. We're not talking about the 300. We're not talking about all of the wrestlers and things of that nature. Let's keep some balance here.
However, these charges were dismissed as Hodgson had a history of accusing people of sexual assault. Hodgson also accused Patterson, as well as another talent, Terry Garvin, of sexually assaulting several underage ring boys. This was actually corroborated by ring boy Tom Cole, who claimed that Patterson groped him when he was 14. There were also rumors that over the years he had sexually assaulted legend Rowdy Roddy Piper. Though Piper may somewhat suggest this in an interview, nothing is certain.
Pat Patterson doesn't like me.
Pat doesn't like you?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Back when again, in the Olympic Auditorium, I was, 21. I must admit, okay, you need to be a man about these, I'm talking about myself, need to be a man about these things. And, like since I was 15, I've been in this business. And when you're young in this business, it can be very difficult.
It's a political thing? Was he trying to keep you down?
No. Hey, probably my fault. I was a pretty little kid, believe it or not, one time, and it just got awkward. That's all.
He made you awkward, and you held a grudge?
Or I did, whatever, my bad.
Were you forced to?
No, my fuck that, no. It's just, it's a hard business.
Once these allegations were made, Pat Patterson and Terry Garvin actually resigned from the WWF. But once the charges from Hodgson were dropped, Patterson returned and continued to be promoted in the company for the years that followed.
He allegedly lured boys as young as 12 or 13 with promises they couldn't resist. Though McMahon has gone on record saying that he wasn't aware of any child sex abuse, we have learned that he fired Phillips a few years ago because he suspected these activities. He then hired him back.
They supposedly care about the kids, Hogan with the little Hulkamaniacs and the prayers of items. And then on the other hand, here there's always been these stories about the little boys being used for sex objects. It's just an unforgivable crime.
Pat Patterson, Terry Garvin, and a few others, or I'm not sure exactly who they were, resigned from their actual posts at the World Wrestling Federation, who had been there for a number of years. That reeks of guilt.
Ironically, although they did prevent us from running the Thomas Cole interview, the affidavit filed for that effect by Thomas Cole and his lawyers provides perhaps the best evidence of precisely the kind of abuse this young man experienced. I'll quote from it. The interviews contain graphic descriptions of sexual abuse I sustained between the ages of 13 and 19, most of it between the ages of 13 and 16. This abuse has left me emotionally scarred, end quote. There is also no doubt that this investigation has scarred the already controversial reputation of the WWF, and there is no lawyer on this planet that can stop me from saying that.
Either you do it or you don't. Here's your job. You want to keep your job, you do it. If you don't want to keep your job, you don't do it.
Did you ever ask anyone if the reason you were not working was because you didn't perform sexual favors on Terry Garvin?
Obviously, Terry Garvin or Pat Patterson or people of that nature who are, you know, second and third in command at Titan Sports are more important than a referee. So, you know, something happened to me. I felt it the whole time that it was due to this, that I wasn't working anymore.
This would only get worse when WWF President Jack Tunney actually claimed to have personally witnessed Terry Garvin sexually harass former WWF referee Mike Clark in the Toronto office, and he was even willing to defend the victim in court.
This and that have, you know, had their jobs that way, gotten their jobs from doing sexual favors, this and that, and I don't know if it's going to continue in the WWF. I'd like to see it not continue for the sake of the kids and everybody else involved, but you know, I just don't think it's going to stop that quick.
However, the WWF actually managed to convince Tunney and Clark to let the issue slide for the greater good of the company, and no charges were pressed.
If people like me and people like everybody else who works in the wrestling business knows about this, the very first day I went to work full-time for the WWF back in '87, my boss told me, you know about Pat Patterson and Terry Garvin. You ever have a problem, come to me. He said to me. So if he knew and everybody else knows, Vince McMahon isn't going to know.
This is a powerful man with a lot of money who cannot stand to have anybody stand up to him and take him on.
Not long after, Jack Tunney was released from the WWF. There's always been speculation as to whether the allegations were the cause or not, though some speculate it was due to Bret Hart. Tunney wasn't a fan of him and his publicity, so he believed that he was fired because of this dispute, while others believe he was using the company money to pay off gambling debts. However, those closest to Tunney have actually denied these claims, and they believe that they're merely excuses for the WWF turning their backs on him. Jack Tunney was hugely responsible for the WWF going national, as he brought their publicity over to Canada, and for years he was the face of the company, portraying the on-screen control of the business. But despite all of his work for McMahon and the WWF, Tunney passed away on January the 24th, 2004 at the age of 69 from a heart attack, without ever resolving his issues with them, and the WWF never acknowledged his death on their website or on any program. Not a single member of the company attended his funeral, supposedly due to Vince McMahon banning anyone from doing so, though this remains uncertain. Hall of Famer Shawn Michaels had also been accused by Brutus the Barber Beefcake of, alongside his tag team partner Marty Jannetty, drugging women in clubs and then sexually assaulting them, something that Michaels has wholeheartedly denied ever since.
The Rockers love those halcyons, man. They freaking, boom, they drop them on all the broads. And then they get them back to their room, and then they'd be passed out. And they'd probably take their laundry off, and they'd have a good time with them. And they'd throw them out in the hallway and shit naked. Yeah, so needless to say, they got in trouble in a few hotels.
I've never, shied away from the stupid stuff I did in the past. If you go back and ask Bruce Beefcake, he'll tell you, one, never seen any of that actually happen. Again, wrestling stories. He's also retracted it after saying it. I can say this: I've had a lot of struggles in my life, and I don't know how to say this without it sounding, shameful, but being with a lady was not something Shawn Michaels had a difficult time doing. I've never been in a situation where it was not consensual or any way, shape, or form. I've never taken advantage of someone in that respect. Those things are done for two reasons, and I've had a lot of counseling in my lifetime. And and the reason you do that stuff is because you dislike women or you have power issues. Shawn Michaels did not have those. He had insecurity issues, and he had problems feeling like he wasn't enough. That's why you go to drugs and downers.
Brutus Beefcake would later retract his claim and denied that it ever actually took place. It was the same year of the steroid scandal when legendary wrestler turned commentator Jerry the King Lawler was actually indicted and charged for the statutory rape and sodomy of a 15-year-old girl. However, the charges were dropped when she took back her story, and Lawler promptly returned to the WWF. However, some have drawn attention to Lawler's gimmick in the company, being overly interested in women and any sexual act, especially with some very questionable things said on the air.
I'm not embarrassed to be with younger women, except when I drop them off at school. Well, I ain't going there.
I think I'm a little too old for you, Jerry. I'm 26. I know you like him younger.
Here's the go.
It's because you married the biggest gold digger in Georgia. Then you put on a woman's wig and you went around the ring kissing men like a flaming fag. Well, let me tell you something.
The fabulous Moolah was heavily publicized as one of the greatest WWF women's champions of all time, a true pioneer in female wrestling. But sadly, behind closed doors, things may not have been as wholesome. It was during the 1990s when she began training talent in her own wrestling school, charging $500. However, according to another female wrestler, Wendy Richter, Moolah would use other wrestlers to train the students without pay. Furthermore, she pressured the women to sign a contract that allowed her to be their own personal booker and to receive 25% of their booking fee. She would allegedly force them to rent duplex apartments on her property, but she would force the students to pay for her rent and utilities. The training would last around 5 hours a day for 6 months in a small wrestling ring inside a barn which lacked any heating or air conditioning. It's been claimed that due to the rent and training fees, most of these students suffered extreme debt and lost control of their entire lives. Mad Maxine claimed that Moolah took at least half of her earnings, while Debbie Johnson claimed that she was forced to give her 30% of her booking fee, and her paycheck suffered as she was charged for travel expenses, food, rent, and utilities. Johnson had worked for Moolah for 2 straight years before receiving any payment. Some have also claimed that she was even a pimp, providing the women to wrestling promoters as sex objects for either themselves or their wrestlers. The women, however, weren't informed of the arrangement until they were there, and supposedly it mostly always led to rape. Sweet Georgia Brown claimed that she had often been raped by Moolah and her husband Buddy Lee, and force-fed drugs leading to an addiction. Sandy Parker was a lesbian student of Moolah's, and she forbid her from ever going to any gay bars, strongly pressuring her to date men instead. Luna Vachon claimed that she was only 16 years old when she was sent to a photographer by Moolah, who was a much older man. While she admitted that she was fully clothed during the photo shoot, she felt taken advantage of by Moolah and the man. And Vachon's aunt Vivian admitted to seeing Moolah abuse alcohol and having sex with other female students. However, she has also been defended by several other wrestlers such as Shane Douglas, Beverly Shade, Bruce Pritchard, and Jerry Lawler, who denied her being that sort of person. Princess Victoria was one of her students and denied Moolah pimping them out, but admitted that she did take their money, while Sweet Georgia Brown's own son denied her allegations. Regardless, Moolah would continue to be promoted by the WWF for years, even often portraying her alleged sexually driven side publicly, but nothing is known for certain.
I remember when Vince called me in, you gotta remember this is a whole different era, that we're not allowed to fight on the floor, you don't hit guys with chairs, nothing. It's all, and they're real big on family entertainment. And so Vince calls me and you know, they're doing the Goldust angle, and he goes, we're going to do this Goldust angle, you know, we're going to do this thing with you. And he goes, you know, he's going to be, you know, he's going to be in love with you. And I remember thinking like, what? Like, I just went through a long angle with Sean, then I worked with Kev, who's like a big killer, and then like, I'm thinking, and he goes, let me tell you about my first homosexual experience. And I remember me and Kev are both sitting in Vince's office at TV, and I looked at Kev, my first thought was, as opposed to your most recent, like you and Warrior on the bearskin rug. But, sorry Vince. But I remember, you know, he was telling me about... And
what the hell did he tell you about?
No, he was telling me about when he was living in North Carolina. He said, I was hitchhiking one time. But see, and I don't know anything about Vince's past, but I'm thinking, hitchhiking from where? The pool to the country club? Like, what? And he said some guy picked him up and was like rubbing his hand on his leg. And I'm thinking, okay, now you're telling me, well, what does this have to do with wrestling? But I remember being a little resistant to it because... I remember being really resistant to it because that wasn't the way we were doing business then.
On October the 5th, 1997, WWF wrestler Brian Pillman was scheduled to compete at the WWF pay-per-view In Your House Bad Blood, but was found dead in his hotel room at the age of 35. The autopsy concluded that this was the cause of a heart attack, possibly due to atherosclerotic heart disease, which his father also suffered from. The next night on the WWF's weekly television show Monday Night Raw, not only did the company pay tribute to their fallen star, but Vince McMahon himself publicly interviewed the grieving widow Melanie Pillman just 24 hours after she tragically lost her husband. This action was heavily criticized, calling it completely distasteful and a sick way to capitalize on a woman's grief to boost ratings.
I'm sure you're distraught, shocked, dismayed over this news, and we thank you very much for joining us tonight. I wonder, there's a great deal of speculation, obviously. There was some speculation last night when we spoke. Brian, because of his injuries, has had to take a great deal of prescribed medicine. There was some speculation that he may have taken too much. If in fact that is proven to be the case, which it is yet to be, is there anything that you would want to say to aspiring athletes who do get hurt and have to resort to prescribed medication, painkillers?
Well, Vince, I can't comment on whether that, I know that my husband, well, not only was he an athlete, but he was involved in a car accident too, and he had extensive injuries from that. And,
yes.
And then after the accident, it was a lot harder for him. But I think all athletes, to a degree, experience a reliance on pain medicine, and I knew it was just a matter of time before it happened to someone, and fortunately, it was my husband.
Melanie, how are the children taking this news, and do they understand?
Well, a 4-year-old doesn't understand. That's little Brian. He doesn't understand why Daddy's not coming home. But Brittany understands, because she's my adopted child, and she's the biological child of my husband and another woman, and that woman killed herself 2 years ago. So Brittany's lost her mom and her dad, biological, and she just screamed for about 15 minutes, and I don't know, Vince. It's hard. It's really hard, but I'm doing.
Have you had any opportunity to think about what you now as a single parent will do to support your 5 children?
Vince, I don't even really know what day it is, so I don't know what I'm going to do.
My experiences with my mother growing up were very far from positive, so I guess it's a little bit of resentment towards her when I say that, but you can hear it in her voice. I mean, she just doesn't sound genuine at all. I mean, the fact that she would take a payday and go on TV and do that. I mean, she was already on her way out of my father's relationship with him before he passed. And it's like you can almost see the sigh of relief in her eyes that he. I mean, and I hate to say this, but it's just true. I mean, it's just true. She was already seeing somebody else. I gotta hand it to the WWE and Vince for doing everything they could to take care of us. They really tried to. They let those shows go on. I mean, you look back, and those were just indie shows. It was a decision she needed to make, you know. And I don't think it's, looking back, I don't know if she regrets it or not. I don't have a very good relationship with her, but at the end of the day, it's like, come on, man. It's like your husband's dead and you're going on TV the next day. Like, are you know, how much do you value your privacy or your mourning? You know what I mean? Most people would be grieving or whatever over their loss.
It would only continue when longtime talent Bret Hart signed an unprecedented 20-year contract with the WWF. But Vince began to question his future with the company. He wanted to turn the WWF into a more adult-themed and sexually oriented product, and he didn't feel like Bret fit that image. McMahon convinced him to sign with the competition WCW, despite him not actually wanting to. But Bret was still the world champion of the WWF, and was refusing to lose the championship to longtime rival Shawn Michaels at the Next Event Survivor Series on November the 9th, 1997, in his homeland of Canada. This led to Vince McMahon going against the scripted finish to the match and conspiring with the referee, Shawn Michaels, and future son-in-law Triple H to make sure that Bret loses on his way out of the company. This now exposed the business as being pre-written, and Vince publicly blamed Bret Hart for the entire thing.
Well, I will certainly take responsibility for any decision I've ever made. I've never had a problem doing that. Not that all of my decisions are accurate, they're not. But when I make a bad decision, I'm not above saying I'm sorry and trying to do the best about it that I can. Hopefully the batting average is pretty good. I make more good decisions than I do bad decisions. And as far as screwing Bret Hart is concerned, there's a time-honored tradition in the wrestling business that when someone is leaving, that they show the right amount of respect to the WWF superstars in this case, who helped make you that superstar. You show the proper respect to the organization that helped you become who you are today. It's a time-honored tradition, and Bret Hart didn't want to honor that tradition. And that's something I would have never ever expected from Bret, because he is known somewhat as a traditionalist in this business. It would have never crossed my mind that Bret would not have wanted to show the right amount of respect to the superstars who helped make him and the organization who helped make him what he is today. Nonetheless, that was Bret's decision. I have no sympathy for Bret whatsoever, none. I have no sympathy for someone who was supposed to be a wrestling traditionalist, not doing the right thing for the business that made him, not doing the right thing for the fans and the performers and the organization who helped make him what he is today. Bret made a very, very selfish decision. Bret's going to have to live with that for the rest of his life. Bret screwed Bret. I have no sympathy whatsoever for Bret.
Going forward, Vince created a character known as Mr. McMahon, which drew in higher ratings. The product became more about sex, crude humor, and less about professional wrestlers. It found the WWF back in the mainstream and in national pop culture, including love triangles in storylines, and they were now drawing in millions of viewers per week, finally defeating Ted Turner's WCW.
It has been said that anything can happen here in the World Wrestling Federation, but now more than ever, truer words have never been spoken. This is a conscious effort on our part to open the creative envelope, so to speak, in order to entertain you in a more contemporary manner. Even though we call ourselves sports entertainment because of the athleticism involved, the key word in that phrase is entertainment. The WWF extends far beyond the strict confines of sports presentation into the wide open environment of broad-based entertainment. We borrow from such program niches like soap operas, like The Days of Our Lives, or music videos such as those on MTV, daytime talk shows like Jerry Springer and others, cartoons like The King of the Hill on Fox, sitcoms like Seinfeld, and other widely accepted forms of television entertainment. We in the WWF think that you, the audience, are quite frankly tired of having your intelligence insulted.
The wrestling business, it's a question of two or more individuals going out to the ring, wrestling, having a little bit of applause or what have you from the audience, and it's time to go home until the next match. That's not really what we do. We're in the sports entertainment business, and there is a huge philosophical difference.
You took Hulk Hogan's blood and you built Titan Towers. You stole Bret Hart's dream, and with that money, bought yourself an airplane with WWF all over it. You stole Shawn Michaels' smile, took your company public, and made yourself a billionaire. See, you're a billionaire on other people's hard work. And you know whose idea you stole the most, Vince? You stole mine. See, I don't give a damn about Don Owen and Sam Muchnick and Jim Crockett. I care about what you did to me and my family. How you stole my dreams. How you stole my legacy. How you stole everything that ECW represented. Because while Doink the Clown had a green hair and a rubber nose, Stone Cold Steve Austin was drinking his first beer in ECW, damn you. While Bobby Heenan and Gene Okerlund were dancing around singing Tutti Frutti, ECW was producing the edgy TV that you named Attitude.
Ted Turner, of course, has the rival
Right.
Wrestling organization.
Well,
he competes with you, and you don't like the man.
No, I really don't. But you know, my mom once told me, you know, Mom said that if you can't say anything nice about someone, don't say anything. And also, all I'll say about...
No, she said hit them with a collapsible chair.
All I'll say about Ted, he's a son of a bitch. You know what I mean? Other than that, he's probably not a bad guy, but, you know, don't like him at all.
Okay.
Matter
But seriously, how do you feel about it?
I can't stand the son of a bitch.
Stop saying that.
I don't know if there's any art form in bashing somebody over the head with a chair, or, you know, if you got big boobs and you can drop your pants in a wrestling ring, you get a high rating kind of thing. That's not what I loved about wrestling.
Vince was petitioning a lot for Ted. He was trying to embarrass Ted, trying to create some anxiety with the shareholders of Turner Broadcasting. Vince was trying to create some unrest and anxiety by being very, very critical about WCW. And whenever you'd see blood in WCW, Vince would write these letters from the King's Court to Ted, criticizing him and WCW and the health and welfare of the talent by saying it's gross, it's crap and all this, and then he'd turn around and do the same thing a month later. None of us took those letters very seriously, and it was pretty obvious what Vince was trying to do. We all just chuckled about it.
Maybe you can remember back when we were employed by you and you ordered us. You ordered us to drive to CNN Center and try to find billionaire Ted. Maybe you remember that one. Then you had us drive to a WCW house show on the back of a stinking land-to-air surface missile that I think you bought illegally from the Iranians. We should actually look into that. And then, magically, by a computer-generated airplane and some bull-crap smoke, you made us write WCW sucks right over the WCW headquarters. So, oh my God, if you're gonna sue us for a parody, I guess this is the one to do it for.
Sadly, on May the 23rd, 1999, tragedy would return as Bret's brother Owen was due to descend down to the ring on a harness as per his superhero character, a stunt that had been done successfully before, but one that Owen didn't want to do as he was afraid of heights. However, something went horrifically wrong and Owen was sent plummeting down to the ring from the ceiling of the arena in front of a live crowd in Kansas City, Missouri.
Tragedy befell the World Wrestling Federation and all of us. Owen Hart was set to make an entrance from the ceiling, and he fell from the ceiling. And I have the unfortunate responsibility to let everyone know that Owen Hart has died. Owen Hart has tragically died from that accident here tonight.
Despite this, the show still continued, even after his death was confirmed. A decision criticized by most, but a decision that Vince McMahon has defended and stuck to all these years. But he was never charged.
Why was he not on a belay line or some other backup line, which is normally used for anybody that's using a rigging? There would be a safeguard that someone would control.
I'm not an expert on rigging, I guess you are.
Well, it would appear that there were no precautionary measures taken. Why not?
First of all, I resent your tone.
I resent the sarcasm. Again,
No, I resent your tone, lady, okay?
Why
you know,
would
this
there
was a
not be
tragic
precautionary
accident. It's a tragic accident. Don't try and put yourself in the spotlight here, okay?
What
This
were your
was an
precautionary
accident.
measures,
Do you
sir?
understand what I'm saying?
What
An
were your
accident.
precautionary measures, sir?
And everything that should have taken place in terms of rigging, to our knowledge at this moment, did take place. It was rehearsed in the afternoon, and everything was fine. And that's all I know.
I actually know firsthand from the wrestlers involved that they wheeled my dead brother right past all the wrestlers, and actually pushed wrestlers out the door and said, go, 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 you're on. And I think that is really insensitive and really cold. And of all people on this planet, that Vince McMahon has no right to speak for my dead brother Owen.
It's an excellent question as to why we continued on, because we have been criticized by many. Some also have supported us for continuing on. It was one of the most difficult things we've ever had to do, was to continue on. Quite frankly, for better or for worse, and people are going to think a lot worse of me for saying this, at the time, we didn't think of not continuing. None of the performers, none of the producers, not me, no one. Now, whether or not that is because as performers it is ingrained in us that the show must go on, I don't know. No one thought of stopping the show at that time.
So when you look back at it then, because at the time you're acting emotionally and
Right.
you're shocked like everyone else, and maybe you're almost in a trance given what has happened. But as you look back and you say, if I could do it again,
Right.
would you have stopped the show?
Well, firstly, let me say that by continuing with the show, certainly, even in hindsight, there was no disrespect to anyone intended. None whatsoever.
None intended.
Right.
But I'm not sure that disrespect was not laid on the Owen Hart family. I'm not sure that if I was a family member
Right.
and someone close to me had died in the ring, and as you put it, what you do, your business is entertainment, and you allowed the entertainment to continue with the blood of Owen Hart still in the ring, I'm not sure that's not disrespectful to Owen Hart and his family.
It may be, from your standpoint. Again, it was something that we did not think about. No one thought about stopping the show.
Well, there's a man that would do anything for $1. The world's greatest car salesman, Vince McMahon, will do anything for $1. And he's a very spiteful, vengeful, you talk about vendettas. This man made promises to me, made promises to my family that unfortunately certain ones accepted, and I think, sold out our dead brother kind of thing. But this man will do anything. He offered me the world the day before the funeral, and 4 days later forgot every bit of it. It's amazing what kind of a devious, sick psychopath this guy really is. And I speak as well or best for Owen when I say that Owen would not have wanted the show to go on. I don't think if you look at anyone with any common sense in their family, no one would want the show to go on. And I think if Vince McMahon had dropped Shane McMahon from the ceiling and he splatted on the mat, I don't think he would have scraped him off the mat and sent the next match out.
Okay, he died at a show in the ring. And Vince still had the show. The show went on. Every time something would happen with one of his wrestlers, he would brush shit over like it didn't happen. You know what I mean? And time would go by, and he's like, "Okay, we'll let that go away. What the fuck ever." You know what I'm saying? And I was just like, "How in the fuck does this guy? Every time somebody dies, he gets away with it."
With several allegations being brought against him over the years, it certainly didn't help Vince's case when he began to incorporate similar things in his televised storylines.
I'm sorry that all my life I've let you manipulate me and use me. All my life just to be the apple of my daddy's eye.
I'm having a little fun here.
Every time I went out to dinner with one of your business associates, I was 17 years old. You don't think they told me what you promised them I'd do? And guess what, Dad? I did it. I did it for you, the things I did with them, and I'm ashamed of myself. I'm ashamed of myself that I'm just like you.
It's almost as if even though I didn't, it's almost as if I
personally deflowered you.
You thought, Trish, you were Daddy's little girl? Oh, no. There's only one Daddy's little girl, and that's my daughter, Stephanie. But I'll tell you what you were. You know what? I'll admit it for the first time. You were Daddy's little toy.
Daddy's little toy?
And you know what happens? You know what happens to toys, Trish? After a while, you get tired of playing with the toys, Trish.
I used to think of you as Daddy's little girl. But now, I look at you, you know what I see? I see your mother. I see two spoiled, ungrateful little rich bitches. That's what I see. I want you to give your mother a message, and that is that soon, after this divorce is final, there's gonna be a new Mrs. McMahon. Oh yeah, there is. A voluptuous Mrs. McMahon, I'll guarantee it. A voluptuous Mrs. McMahon that can keep up with my sexual prowess. Yeah. And by the way, tell your mother that chances are the new Mrs. McMahon is going to be about your age.
You're suspended. You're gonna cry now.
Vince, don't do this. No,
You're gonna cry. You're gonna cry. You're suspended indefinitely.
I find you to be an extremely attractive man, and it's very difficult for me to keep my hands off of you. You have such nice shoulders and your chest. But your hair, it just really drives me crazy.
I've waited so long to see you face to face like this. And I've waited so long to tell you to your face that I hate your stinking guts. But it's not just me. It's your children that hate your stinking guts, Vince.
Bark like a dog. Come on. Tell me you're sorry.
I didn't think it was all that super offensive, but she really felt bad about it. You know?
What do you do when he...
Because I don't think that, I mean, how is that much different from, you know, a lot of the, it was just kind of another stupid storyline. You know? It was just kind of, I don't know, I just always feel like as a performer, you're always, the best parts are doing something that creates, you know, a stretch in your abilities. Trish was offended and there was a lot of talk about it, but you know, I guess she felt like it was okay because she was going to get her just desserts in the end. And
on Super Bowl Sunday in 1994, I woke up with an affliction called Bell's palsy, and my entire left side of my face looked like I had a stroke. You think I like that? You think I like that my left eye doesn't open all the way because I got sick? Well, let me tell you how warm-hearted Mr. McMahon is. Mr. McMahon called me into his office on February the 11th, 1994, and he fired my ass. I am no pervert.
There's one other thing I don't do, Vince.
What's that?
I don't have dirty, unprotected sex with some money-grubbing skank who eventually files a paternity suit against me, which gets me kicked out of my own house. Yeah, leaves me nothing but a living, breathing, national disgrace.
You are, so help me God, the most disgusting, vile son of a I've ever seen in my life. You flaunt your affairs in front of your wife. You flaunt your affairs in Playboy for your children to read. You.
And I am sick of our chairman who likes to talk about his own semen. He mocks God, and makes out with the divas, all to feed his own insatiable ego.
Dad, Mom loves you. Don't you know that?
Do you think that all these guys leaving the WWF was an accident? Hell no, it's not. This ain't a damn wrestling match. Oh no, hell no. No angles, no spots, no finish, just men versus you two pussies. And if you got what it takes, then by God, you bring that crap. Vince McMahon, let's see how big your balls are. You accept our challenge, or you prove to the world that you're a gutless piece of shit.
He would put himself in storied situations involving romanticizing with young attractive women on the roster, sometimes in front of his real-life wife. Some have admitted that it was widely known in their circle that Vince McMahon had cheated on Linda previously, but they were unaware of anything further taking place.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
I don't think anybody who worked there is.
It hasn't been a secret. I mean, like, there's always been allegations, and I don't think anybody really truly believes they weren't true. I think they just believe that they, like we know now, they were just paid off for, hush money. So this is no shock. I mean, like, we live in this world, and it happens all the time.
I'm shocked this Vince stuff is just now coming out. I mean, I haven't looked up on a lot of it and like, I want to get the details because I just would rather not. But I'm surprised it hasn't come out within the last 10 years. But that just goes to show how afraid people are of that power dynamic, where they're so fearful of losing their job, or it's like, what does that say about you if you're protecting this 90-year-old fucking corpse with a thong tan line just because he's a billionaire? I mean, it's like I said, money changes people.
The problem is that people with that kind of sickness and mindset and power why do they thrive for so long? Why doesn't anybody stand up? Why are there so many people in that company aware of what's going on to hold these women who keep committing suicide year after year after year, and nobody stands up and says anything? No one tries to protect these young women. Why? Because it's not just Vince, it's the whole freaking company.
Vince had put forth several storylines involving rape, even portraying the rapist as a good guy, or the act itself as a positive.
I'll be even more glad when you service me.
Booker, I want to have sex with your wife. And I'm not just talking any kind of sex with your wife. No. I'm talking, that kind of bestiality sex with your wife. What I want with your wife, Charmel, I want to have that kind of perverted sex.
And even included necrophilia.
The question I have is, on that night, did you force Katie Vick to have sex with you while she was alive? Or did you just wait and do it to her when she was dead?
I mean, I can't even believe I'm going to say I did this. I'm at a funeral home with a dummy in a coffin. Oh my God. I'm naked except I've got a skin-colored thong on, right, so nobody can see. With Kane's mask on, pretending I'm Kane, I'm on top of the coffin having mock sex with this mannequin.
Oh my God, no!
And
Jesus Christ!
Oh yeah, and Vince is yelling at me, God damn it, do it harder, make more noise and stuff. It's got to be over the top. And there's a funeral in the next room going on. I'm not shit. The funeral director just like opens the door and sticks his head in and look in. I look back. I got this Kane mask on. I'm buck naked. I mean, how you doing?
He would try to pour real alcohol on either straight edge wrestlers or even ones who were recovering alcoholics in real life. He asked for his talent to sometimes appear completely naked despite children being in the audience.
They're going to build the whole show around Christian and Jericho against Booker T and Goldust. And what was going to happen was they were going to go into the dressing room and steal our clothes. And then the rest of the show, Christian and I would be looking through the arena in towels trying to find our clothes. Then we'd go out to the stage because Booker and Goldust would be in the ring. We got your clothes, and then they would have the clothes and they would start throwing them onto the ground. And while that was happening, somebody would come up behind us and take our towels off to where we would be standing there naked. We would be standing there in front of 10,000 people naked. And I'm like, so how do we disguise this? Like, you don't. What? Vince wants you to be naked. And I said to Michael Hayes, are you kidding me? He goes, well, you don't want to do it? I said, do you? Not a Chippendales dancer. There's little kids in the crowd. I'll get arrested for being a pedophile. So I said, Mike, I'm not doing it. There's no way. And Christian was kind of scared because he was just getting the push at the time, and he was just like, dude, we're not. You want to stand there naked? No, we're not doing it. Then 10 minutes later, Vince wants to see you. I'm like, of course he does. I go in the office. He's like, hey, so I heard you have a question about today. I said, I don't have a question. I have a statement. Yes, I'm not doing it. I am not standing naked in front of a crowd on Monday Night Raw. And he's like, well, damn it, what are we supposed to do then? I'm like, so aren't you going to get kicked off the air? He's like, well, we'll shoot it from far away. Who cares? A cock's a cock. It's going to be in the shot. So then he goes, well, what do you suggest we do? I said, well, why don't we have, if you absolutely insist on having us do this, why don't you have the seamstresses make us like a flesh-colored G-string thong, and we can at least wear that. And then on top of that, put one of those like digitizing things over us once it happens. Wow, that's not as good. What's wrong with you?
And he even began a long-running storyline of his character forcing people to kiss his bare ass on live television.
Go ahead, kiss my ass.
Oh. Wait a minute.
Come on.
Yes.
Fuck her up.
Don't you love sports entertainment?
Oh, no, it gets better than that.
No way! Oh, my God. Kiss it!
Go ahead. It's a nice looking ass.
What in the blue hell do you think you're doing, you sick freak?
There was even an incident where Vince's daughter Stephanie was involved in a love triangle, and allegedly he was way too invested in it.
You know, it's really uncomfortable to have to kiss, Triple H's, future wife, but it's even more difficult to kiss Vince McMahon's daughter. Now, especially in this situation. Okay, Vince decided he wanted to direct the pre-tape. So, Stephanie and I are both on the couch, and Vince, this is the look on his face. He had a chair, he pulled it up right next to the couch. And he was like this. I'm like, holy f***. This guy is either interested in seeing me kiss Stephanie McMahon or he wants to get off on it. I'm not sure what it was. It was crazy. So I kissed Stephanie, and Vince had that look in his eyes, he was kind of into it.
This would only become creepier when his daughter Stephanie admitted that she was once approached by Vince asking to do a storyline involving her becoming pregnant with his child. Once she refused, he then changed it to have her brother Shane be the father instead.
Approached me about wanting to be the father of my baby in a storyline for TV, which again is only the second time I've ever actually said no to him for something he wanted to do, and that one was just a little too gross, actually. It's completely disgusting, and I don't find the entertainment value in it at all. And he's actually my father, so how could I even play that out? I can't fake kiss my dad like we were in love or something. I mean, it's just revolting all the way around. So then he came up with the idea for Shane to actually be the father of my baby, my brother. And I, again, just know that I know that sometimes that happens in this world, but it's not going to happen with us. I just can't do that. That's too much.
It was Vince's idea, your dad, where he wanted an incest angle with you and Stephanie. And I think, was it Bruce that stepped in and was like, yo, we just can't do this. Do you have any memory of this? He told this story and we were laughing so hard.
Well, my sister's hot. I don't know if I really would have minded that.
I'll tell you one that I personally said absolutely no to, and my dad says, all right, and my mom was involved in some stuff, and my dad says, all right, and then you come up, and then you're going to slap your mother. And I went, no. And he went,
good for you.
He goes, yeah. I said, Dad, I'm not going to hit my mother.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
I said, I had a hard time hitting you, and you're my dad. Never raised a hand to you, you know?
Yeah.
The poor treatment of the talent could also span to Chyna, another female pioneer in women's wrestling. She had formed a relationship with Triple H, but according to her, he began seeing Vince's daughter Stephanie while they were still together. Not long after Triple H and Chyna split, she subsequently vanished from WWF television and wasn't even publicly acknowledged, despite still being the current women's champion. She was kept off television for months until her contract expired in November, and she was then quietly released, though she would later claim that it had nothing to do with her and Triple H.
I went from this billion-dollar commodity, right?
Mhm.
In this business, just on the street, nothing. And wasn't like I was making like what the guys were making. Like I had this future and I was set, I still had to work and I was still under contract and they were giving me trouble with the name and the likeness, and
What was the
not
reason-
to mention just the pain
Yeah.
of everything.
No, we'll get there.
What
But
was
what was the reason they gave you that, they let you go?
They
had to
never
give you
gave me a reason.
That's some shady shit.
There was never a reason.
Your contract happened to be up, and they decided, we're not going to renew this.
There was never a reason. The last thing Vince said to me was blood was thicker than water, and that he'd be in touch with me. And then the following week I went home. I was sitting in a Jerry's Deli eating lunch, and a fax mysteriously went to Jerry's Deli, and it was from the WWE, and they said they wouldn't be needing me anymore.
What?
But
After what you gave them.
She was then barely mentioned in the years that followed, but it led to Chyna suffering from substance abuse, and some attribute that to her treatment by the WWF, before sadly passing away in 2016 at the age of 46. It was in 2000 when Vince decided to expand his business ventures, starting up the Extreme Football League, but by February the following year, the ratings were so low that it was soon shut down. On March the 23rd, 2001, the WCW were in dire straits, leading to Vince finally buying out his competition and ending the decade-long feud. Similarly, on April the 1st that same year, independent wrestling company ECW, known for its extreme stunts in the world of wrestling, filed for bankruptcy, and Vince would also end up buying all rights to them 2 years later. On May the 4th, 2002, the WWE held the pay-per-view event Insurrection in the UK. But sadly, on the plane flight back to the United States, several horrific things took place, now dubbing the incident the plane ride from hell. The plane was a Boeing 757, which included an open bar, causing several wrestlers on board to become intoxicated, and it led to several physical altercations and sexual harassment claims from the flight attendants Tarolyn Capilano and Heidi Doyle. Scott Hall, who had a history of alcoholism, said several vulgar sexual remarks to Heidi before passing out. Kurt Hennig, who wrestled under the name Mr. Perfect, got into a fight with Brock Lesnar, which nearly led to them bumping into the plane's emergency exit. Goldust made several sexually inappropriate things to the attendants before using the plane's public address system to serenade his wife, Terry Runnels, who was also on board. Ric Flair allegedly not only exposed himself to both flight attendants, but he also grabbed their hands and forced them to touch his genitalia, though he would later deny these claims. Scott Hall and Kurt Hennig were fired for this incident, while Goldust and Ric Flair weren't, and continued to compete for the company for years. It was in 2004 when the flight attendants actually sued the WWE, and it was settled out of court. And this is when they officially changed their name to World Wrestling Entertainment. Though Vince was adamant that they would continue to produce the same edgy, sexually driven television programming, but he did concede that they would return to focusing on the art of professional wrestling. On June the 15th, 2002, the police were called to the home of WWE legend Stone Cold Steve Austin. Austin's wife of 2 years, Deborah Marshall, was found with bruises following an assault, and her husband had abruptly left the premises.
Did things change once you got married?
Yeah.
How did things change?
Not for the good.
Right.
Yeah, Steve just got a little bit more aggressive with his personality.
Do you think? Go ahead.
No, it was just, it was, yeah, he'd never. So that was really difficult because I'm working now, married to him, and then, the domestic abuse, because the last time when the police were called, when he was arrested, that was the third time. And I'm not a really big woman, and it's just, it was just time. I had read up on it, and it was getting a little bit out of hand. People that knew me, they could tell I was becoming more in a shell because he didn't really like me talking to people, and I was becoming really like a recluse,
right.
Which is not my personality.
So he was controlling, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Everyone knew that too, but that's Steve. You don't mess with Steve. But yeah, and then I remember the first time he hit me was in the hotel room.
An actual punch or a slap or?
He actually slapped me, and then he threw me across the room.
Wow.
So then I had bruises on my face, and they had to cover them up on TV, and then I had to go to the doctor when I got home. I thought my collarbone was broken.
What was the fight even about, if you don't mind me?
Something stupid. Just, it's embarrassing. It was more, he wanted me to do something intimate, and I was like, I'm tired, and that's what he got mad about.
Gotcha.
That's what he hit me for.
A warrant was issued for his arrest on August the 12th, before he handed himself in and was promptly charged for domestic abuse. This had been an ongoing issue in their relationship for a while, and allegedly the WWE were fully aware, often covering up her bruises with makeup for television.
He would almost laugh about it a little bit. Like, I don't think he realized the rage that was in him. And it was hard for me because, people love him. I don't know if he ever realized, he would always say he was sorry afterwards, which is one of the signs that keeps you in the cycle. Because then you're like, oh, he's so sweet. I know it sounds crazy for women that's never experienced. And me, of all people, I'm such a strong person. But it just keeps you pulled in there.
Did you ever try to talk to Vince or someone in power about his problems, or was that something that your dad had to do?
No, because my job was tied into that. I mean,
right.
That was my job. That was and they don't want to hear, this is their top star, they don't want to hear about this. I mean, they got their own problems they're dealing with. But when that happened, boy, I knew I was going to lose my job. I knew it was going to be everywhere. And when I made that phone call, he left the house and the police came within 5 minutes, and I knew then it was so embarrassing.
When he would hit you, would it be a just slap, or would it actually be closed fist, or?
The last time he hit me was really pretty violent. He did a backhand on me, and then he was pounding me in my head. So that was I can understand how women feel when you're going to die, because I thought my head was going to explode.
On November the 25th, Austin pleaded no contest and received 1 year probation, 80 hours of community service, and a $1,000 fine. Deborah would later claim that the WWE had pressured her into keeping quiet about the abuse to save them from a poor reputation and millions of dollars. Austin would always deny that it was alcohol related, but he did seek anger management, citing deep regret for his actions, and the two would remain amicable in the years that followed, despite divorcing in 2003.
He got a year, which I wanted him to have for his anger, and that's what I wanted to come out of this. So he got a year probation, and he had to do anger management classes and pay a fine and do community service. So hopefully, that's what I wanted. I wanted him to get some help, and then, I, look at the good thing. Now I'm doing, speaking to schools about domestic violence and all that, so.
So after the last time, was that pretty much you guys were through at that point in time? I mean, did you guys have any contact?
Actually, we got back together for a little bit, and then during his court time, because I was ready to throw the book at him. They were ready to, put him in jail. And so I was sort of being supportive of him so they wouldn't throw the book at him.
Right.
We'll still, we're friends now. I think time heals, and time, it's been a few months since I talked with Steve, but we talk every now and then. And that's good because, you got to move on in your life, and you've got to, we both, this happened, and he's gotten some help, which is great. And I've moved on to, turn a negative into a positive and, talk to schools and stuff.
However, it would only continue in March 2004 when he was again accused of assaulting his girlfriend Tess Broussard, though no charges were pressed. However, those close to Austin claimed that she was actually the one abusing him, which even led to a bodyguard being stabbed during an assault. On February the 1st, 2006, an unnamed worker at a tanning bar in Boca Raton, Florida, accused Vince McMahon of sexual harassment. This claim was initially discarded as he was at the WWE event The Royal Rumble over in Miami at the time. However, it was later confirmed that the report was made to the police on the day of the Rumble, but the actual harassment took place the day before. Unfortunately, on March the 25th, 2006, the charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence, but this didn't stop other female talent coming forward with grievances against the company.
I was in an era that was very raunchy, right? There were things that I had to say no to. They wanted me to paint like what Sable did, paint my boobs and walk out there naked. And I said no. Like, there are certain things that I turned down that maybe I could have gotten ahead with, but it just didn't feel right.
These girls would come in and out, and they'd get hired for a little while, and the guys would ooh and and they'd put them on TV, and they don't give them any coaching or anything, in the hopes that they look as dumb as they want them to look for a laugh, and then they're gone. But these real live dancer girls that we would get on our house show nights, and just plucked from that community, was just so entertaining. And I always thought to myself, this is so weird that it's become so normal to see girls walking down in a pack of 4 or 5 of them with their ass cheeks hanging out of their dresses and those big hooker shoes that are back in style now.
Yeah.
And but it was like normal.
And Charles loved it, didn't he?
Well, all of us loved it because they were there to work. The agents wouldn't say, oh, you can't wear that. It's not, the censors on TV wouldn't appreciate it. Okay, this is like they could do whatever they wanted, and I'm sure they had a lot of fun in the closets with the guys, but just to see them walking down the arena hallways, I always had a double take of like, this is so weird. That girl's ass is hanging out of her dress, and it's okay here. This is weird.
That's wrong. Why is Vince responsible? What? Since when do people not take responsibility for their own actions? Like, how do you blame somebody for what you're doing to yourself? That doesn't make sense to me.
How about your initial impressions of Vince McMahon when you finally met him?
Just a bigger than life character. He definitely takes up a room when he comes into it, and he's got a hold of everything that he's doing. So I was just a little bit intimidated and just kind of working my way through, just trying to get through the diva search,
And I used to say this, I'd be like, why doesn't anyone hit on me? What's wrong with me?
I look back to a lot of those segments at that time that were so interesting. I love like mixing up with different characters. The fact that I could be in the ring with Rikishi, with Vince McMahon, with The Rock, it's like incredible, right? And then creating those moments that like when the fans go mental crazy, where like you said, the roof gets blown off. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. I'm thankful for those moments that I was actually chosen to be a part of these moments.
Not only did Tori Wilson admit to being forced to do sexually explicit angles which she found uncomfortable, possibly alluding to a storyline where she was coerced into a rape scenario with her would-be stepmother on live television in front of her real-life father, much to the delight of the audience, but others found several circumstances extremely uncomfortable. Lesbians would kiss in the ring for the fans' entertainment, women would wrestle down to their underwear, and WWE legend Edge and Lita even had sex in the middle of the ring during a live edition of Raw, and Vince insisted that Lita genuinely was naked. To the point there was a slip, and Lita's breast was actually exposed publicly on the television broadcast. According to her, she was even threatened to be fired if she didn't do the act, but none involved were comfortable with this entire thing.
Yeah, that was the night after I won the title for the first time, and that was brought to me. I was like, really don't want to do that, but
I called all of my friends and my mom, and I was like, please do not watch tomorrow. Whatever you do not watch. Because I was just absolutely mortified. We both were kind of like, okay, maybe what if we do a live tap dancing celebration. And they're like, nope, live sex celebration. We're like, okay. What if we baked a cake? And then, they're nope, live sex celebration. We're like,
live sex celebration. Were you actually supposed to have sex, or where was the line drawn?
right. Well, he wanted me naked. He's like, no, well, you'd be naked. And I'm like,
what?
Well, but I mean, are you sure? Well, yeah. When you're having sex, you're naked. I'm just like, oh.
You were running talent relations. Did she ever bring any concerns in this era to you that you recall?
Maybe a casual conversation, but nothing to the level of, I don't want to do this. If she had come to me and said, I don't want to do this, I refuse to do this, I'm not comfortable doing it, then she wouldn't have had to do it. Would have done something else.
I'm never breaking any stories there. I had talked about that I was not cool with doing that. I've talked about that since 2005, and it just never made any headlines. But now, since we've fortunately evolved as a climate and society, it was shocking just not that long ago. But yeah, my story's never changed.
This only happened after Lita had a long-term relationship with wrestler Matt Hardy before having an affair with married wrestler Edge. All parties have since made amends with this situation, but at the time Matt reacted with pure anger, and the WWE actually released him due to this, before forcing the three of them to incorporate this very, very real story of heartbreak into a storyline on live television for the entire world to see.
You bastard! I'm gonna make your life miserable! And Lita, you whore! I'm gonna make your life miserable too! And the WWE can kiss my ass!
Let me tell you a little something about life. What about when you were out hurt with your broke neck as we were friends and I called you every week, Adam? Are you okay, dude? If there's anything I can do,
yeah,
please
like
let me know.
I said, definitely.
And week in and week out. No, but when I was out hurt, you stupid bastard, you lying coward. What did you do? You did everything you could do to get inside my girl's head and inside her pants.
Yeah, I
thanks for repaying
Yeah,
me so well.
I waited for you to leave,
friend.
Matt. No,
what a class
you couldn't
act.
supply
You're
what a real man needs to supply. You can't do it.
You're a scumbag,
You're a little
Adam.
boy, plain and simple.
Not only was Lita also involved in another rape storyline where her character was forced to marry another against her will and then subsequently impregnated, but after years of service to the WWE, once temporarily retiring, she was humiliated on her way out of the door as her fictitious sexual belongings were exposed and passed around to the live audience. Christy Hemme was another woman who entered the WWE during a diva search competition. She was extremely popular with the crowd and even managed to compete at WrestleMania, but she vanished from television and was soon released not long after. When discussing her release, Christy told The Tomorrow Show,
"It wasn't on my own accord. WWE asked me to move to OVW to train and I was like, yes, I get to go train. I want to go work hard. I was really excited, and then when I got there, I was there for maybe a week and then I got the call that I was released and I was heartbroken, crushed. There's stuff that I just don't need to go into, but I have said it before. I'm a strong woman that lives by my morals, and if you ask me to do something that's not within my morals, I will say no. So once I put that, line down, that's when I got the axe. It was one specific incident, so I'm just gonna leave it at that cause I don't need to go into details. It was not a wrestling related risque thing. I did Playboy."
Based on her wording and later allegations, it's been posited that Christy was sexually propositioned, and once she turned them down, she was subsequently let go. But nothing is for certain.
So they sent you down there for a week and then you got a notice that they were just going to let you go from the company? Who gave you that news?
Johnny, he pretty much goes over.
He's the Axeman now.
Yeah,
so
he's the Axeman, so I was like, okay. I had a feeling. I told you. I knew something was up.
Was he the guy who told you on the plane as well that you learned about it?
I knew something was up, so it wasn't like a big shocker to me.
Again, these are all just internet rumors, so you can just treat them however you'd like.
I know, I've heard them all now.
You said, do you follow the internet rumors?
No, I don't follow them, but every time I do an interview, they're like, so have you heard this, and what's the truth of this? And I'm like, I haven't heard of that one yet. That's new to me, or I think I'm sure I've heard all of them now.
Well, the one that seems to surface the most often is that one of the reasons you were released is because you were hitting on Triple H.
Which isn't true. But Actually, to be perfectly honest, none of the rumors on the internet are even
remotely true,
which is how I know that there are a lot of rumors, because it's not even anywhere close. I really, really liked Stephanie McMahon, and I thought highly of, and think highly of, Triple H. He's an amazing wrestler, and I admire everything that Stephanie has, put into the business, but that's just not a place that I would ever go, and I have a lot of respect for marriage. I have high morals for that kind of stuff and wouldn't cheat with a married man,
So does it hurt you when you hear like rumors like that?
No, because it would hurt me if I did it.
So you were not given a clear reason as to why you were released. What would be?
No, the only reason I was given was that that they didn't have anything for me on TV, and
Which I'm sure you don't buy that.
no, I mean it's.
So if you were to speculate,
the thing is that it's. I can't really I've obviously gone over it in my head, and the way that I really feel and the truth that I can put in my own head is that coming to TNA feels like such a blessing to me, and I don't feel like I fit in at WWE, and I don't think I would have completely gone ahead with anything 100% of what the company wanted me to do for the company.
I do know for a fact that shit had happened, because there were a couple of young ladies. There was one actually that I know for a fact had come to me for advice, because something she was being approached very hard, and it was very uncomfortable. So I do know for a fact, and she wound up leaving. She was like, it was like during those Diva Search, one of those Diva Search girls.
It wouldn't get much better when Mickie James was asked to lose some weight, and when she supposedly refused, her weight gain was then inserted into a public WWE storyline to body shame her in front of the entire world.
Of course they want you to stay. I mean, you're the easiest one to see in the ring. That was like going on
And plus, it's like a 2-for-1 special, because when you're in the ring, Piggy, not only do they get to see WWE, but they get to watch the Animal Planet all at the same time. Education!
Furthermore, when she was later released from the company, she received her belongings in trash bags.
When you were released in 2010, did your stuff arrive in a trash bag then too?
It did.
Wow.
It did. And I said that, and I said that, and I was like, I guess, this is the crazy thing, because I think that, the fans reminded me almost, like I kind of posted that picture, and not in jest, I would say, but more as a, oh yeah, this is still a thing. This is kind of on par.
You're kind of saying like, I'm used to this. This is what I expected.
Because we become so desensitized to, because we've put up with so much crap in wrestling that you forget that, because we live in our own, like it's a bubble, we live in our own world, and we like all these things that I forgot how that was offensive. I forgot that it was actually, you know what I mean? I was just more like, hey, yeah, this is not cool, but okay, whatever, but I also, and there was more to that than that too, because I also rewinded back to 10 years, the 2010 Mickie James, and where I was mentally in that space. And when that happened that time, the first time, it was like the stab in the heart to my already open wound. You know what I mean? Like that was a real like low blow, because I genuinely took it then as they think I'm trash. They're throwing me out with the garbage. Like after, obviously I hadn't like done, you know what I mean? I was with the company at that point, besides developmental on television for like, 4 years, 5 years at that point. But for me, I go like, they just think I'm like, I can't believe it. They just like are throwing me out with the garbage, and they think I'm trash. And it's just all these things, all these thoughts, these weak thoughts were running through my head, but they're real thoughts. And if you're already broken down, they can really devastate a person. And so that, it reminded me of that. And so when I'm thinking about it, then I'm thinking about that list of people who got released right beside me. And I'm like, I see my name on the bag, and I'm like, well, that's because that's defining which bag is going in which box, So then I'm thinking about whatever, like I'm thinking about those girls going, oh my God, they got to be heartbroken over this, but they're never going to say anything. Just like 10 years ago, Mickie would have never said anything, because I would never want to mess up an opportunity for the future, because there's always, you know, an opportunity to do something in the future. There's always an opportunity to do something, a second chance or something, right?
Ashley Massaro was another contestant in the aforementioned Diva Search, and had allegedly been sexually propositioned and had confided this story to several colleagues. She would later be released from the WWE at her own request.
But I do remember specifically many times when she would be crying to me because Vince was propositioning her to fly on the jet with them. Like Kevin Dunn, Bucktooth Bucky would be telling her that she has to fly on the jet with him, or that he might, you know, possibly, or every now and then, if she was at the, you know, they'd always put the divas up at like the TV hotel or whatever, you know, he'd be knocking on her door and, you know, trying to get her to answer. And it's just like.
When Ashley first started working for the WWE, she told me in the locker rooms, it was like they handed out Soma like it was candy.
Soma?
Soma. It's a muscle relaxer.
Okay.
So it was what they would give the wrestlers when they were injured, because there was no not wrestling.
Sure.
You had a broken arm, you take a Soma, you wrestle. At that point, she had become addicted to Somas. So she was already in this state. And so whatever they administered to her rendered her helpless. Her body was useless to her, but her mind was there, and she saw what was happening.
It would only continue years later when she joined a lawsuit against the company, formed by Konstantin Kairos, who claimed that the WWE had concealed risks of injury that caused their talent neurological damage. Massaro also claimed that she had actually been sexually assaulted at a US military base during a WWE tour of Kuwait.
And she said to you she was raped and sodomized in
yes.
that room
That's
multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, it's just hard to believe that she says that a WWE executive carried her out of that
That's right,
room and
yes.
to her hotel room.
That's right, yes. Yeah,
What
he
happened
wrapped a blanket around her. He wrapped a blanket around her and carried her out, because she still, when he came and got her, she was still limp. She still wasn't able to move her body.
She said to you, and correct me if I'm wrong, she said to you that they left her, not only left her in that hotel room, they left her in Kuwait alone.
Yeah.
How did she get back?
She was, they got her a flight. Days after everyone was already home, she was left alone because they had to go back to work. Vince wanted them back in the USA because they had work to do.
In response, the company apologized and managed to convince Massaro to not report it to the authorities, and the lawsuit was dismissed.
As soon as she got back to the States, I mean, she had the phone calls while she was in Kuwait. I mean, it was out from the beginning, right after it happened. As soon as she was able to talk on the phone and get
did it go right to Vince
right
McMahon?
to the top, right to the top.
She spoke with Vince McMahon.
She spoke with Vince McMahon many times. Vince had his daughter,
Stephanie McMahon,
take his place because she was a female, a woman, and to make Ashley comfortable, and they just played with her. They played with her because everything that Stephanie had made her feel comfortable and safe about. As soon as they walked into this boardroom meeting, Ashley was on her own completely, and she was threatened, and there was no compassion, there was no sympathy, there was nothing.
So Ashley Massaro, your best friend, told you that she went into a boardroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the WWE, where Stephanie McMahon, Vince McMahon, and other executives were seated.
The entire, yes.
And that's where she was told, this has to stay under wraps.
That is right. And she had, right before she walked into that boardroom, she talked to the locker room doctor, who was aware of everything, and he was actually very sympathetic to her, but he had no pull.
Sadly, on May the 15th, 2019, Ashley Massaro committed suicide, calling into question the mistreatment of mental health under the WWE roof.
It took me by surprise too. I had received a message from a friend of mine in England he just said, "I'm so sorry about Ashley." And I was like, what? Like, I don't know what's going on. And that's when I found out. And yeah, very, very upsetting and a very sad ending for her, because at her core, just, genuinely a very friendly and bright and sweet person who everyone for the most part got along with.
Do you think that what happened to Ashley as she recounted to you? Do you think that contributed to her suicide?
99%.
It was only after her death that an affidavit was released to the public, with Massaro detailing her sexual abuse under WWE grounds. The company claimed that they had not known about the abuse described, though executive John Laurinaitis would later admit that they did.
It's about time somebody has a conscience, because there was never a single moment of time that I didn't believe a word that Ashley told me. So
Dr. Rios, the doctor, said that she told him this. And that's when it's like, okay, but also told him not to tell anyone. And he did anyway, and I guess he told Laurinaitis, and what Laurinaitis said I already knew, which is like, okay, then they did know when they're claiming that they didn't know, you know what I mean? It's like, it's like.
How did Laurinaitis know unless she told him?
Or somebody said it. And Rio said, there's the story that others knew as well. So I think her story has a lot of credibility, even with the deal of her writing that letter where she apologized to them, which nobody's brought up in the story. But, and to me, it's like, you're going to cover the story. You got to bring up that part of it too. It's like, you can't just be the Konstantin Kairos. Absolutely, both sides, sure. I wrote both sides. I said, like, look, she did write that letter, and why she wrote it. Maybe again, there's so many things of people who get wronged there who still want to come back because it's a way to make money and be famous.
Though they would pay tribute to her death on the television broadcast. However, the mistreatment issues weren't specific for just women. Brody Lee wrestled for the WWE under the name Luke Harper, but at one point McMahon disliked one of his matches and suddenly decided to cancel all creative decisions concerning him. He kept him off television for weeks, leading to Harper asking to be released from his contract, which Vince personally denied. His contract then came to an end, but the WWE actually extended it for a further 6 months, claiming that he owed them time after being off with an injury. At one point, frustrated at the situation, Harper actually sat outside Vince McMahon's office for 3 hours waiting for a meeting with him to discuss his future. But after this long wait, Vince informed him that he didn't want to see anyone. Harper was finally released from his contract not long after. Tragically, Brody Lee passed away on Boxing Day in 2020 from health complications. Despite having left the company at this point, the WWE still paid tribute, but Vince McMahon himself was reportedly furious that so many people had cared about his passing. Harper had allegedly tried to fit into the WWE family during his time there, but Vince supposedly disallowed him and hated him for some unknown reason.
I mean, I lost a lot of respect for him after Brody Lee passed away, because I heard he made some remarks to people that were not very becoming of him. And I knew how much Brody had tried to really just be a person with Vince and really make WWE his family. And Vince just wouldn't have it. Like he just hated him for some reason. That's inexplainable to me. And so the things he said at the time he did just did it to me. I was like, well, fuck him. I don't even care. I was honestly like, even knowing like, man, maybe there's a chance to go back one day. And once I'd heard that stuff, I was like, never. I'll never ever want to work for them.
Really?
Hell, you know what? I'm going to be honest. You're not just apologizing to me. You're apologizing to these people for being one of the biggest hypocrites I've ever seen in my entire life. As far as your anti-bullying campaign goes, you're one of the biggest bullies I have ever met in my entire life, and you will apologize.
I mean, I was very close with Brody. I knew kind of what he went through, just trying to prove himself to Vince that he was more than just a sidekick or a, backwoods hick type of thing. And so I was really surprised at how Vince took Brody's death and how little he cared and how much it pissed him off that people did care about it.
I have had friends, very talented friends, work for this company and be unceremoniously fired.
They deserved it.
They deserved it? They deserved it. Why? Because you don't know what makes a superstar in 2011? You don't know what these people want?
Vince needs somebody there that he trusts that can do it the right way. So I was flying from California to New York every week to do the pre-show, and because they hired a lot of people that never worked for him before. So I trust Vince implicitly. Like, I've done so much for him, with him. Everybody knows that. And so you turn in invoices, right? Well, I didn't turn mine in right away because I'd worked for him for 20 years. He had always paid me.
Sure.
Right? So COVID happens, and I have a fairly large check, and I hold on to it for a couple of days. I go put it in the bank, it bounces.
Wow.
It bounces. And so I called or texted a high executive there, and I got a response, "Oh, that's a lot of money." I said, "I agree." I agree. I said, "Can you just call Vince and let's take care of this quietly? No big deal."
Yeah.
And ghosted me.
Wow.
Absolutely ghosted me. And, you know, Vince has the amount of money in his back pocket. You know what I mean? And it really hit me hard. And it wasn't the money. It was the process. You know what I mean? That, and I sat there, I'll never forget, Chris. I sat there one day and I'm sitting there going, man, they really bounced a check to me. Oh, I did get a second text. It was like, "Oh, that's another company. I don't think there's anything we can do." So basically telling me people I'd worked with for 20 years, "Oh, that's the XFL. It's not the WWE." There's no, but the same guy owns the two.
Yeah.
Right? And everything was a crossover. So that to me was a complete slap in the face.
If that's going to be the guy running a company, I don't ever want to work for him again.
It wasn't much better for Jon Moxley, who competed in the WWE under the name Dean Ambrose. Over the years, he would approach Vince McMahon with ideas for his character and storylines, only to be told that they were all stupid. He had no choice but to follow along with the boss, dreading any time that he had to go through McMahon's script on television, and he became mentally and physically ill over it. Once his contract expired, the final straw came when he was forced by Vince to go on television and claim that he was leaving to prevent catching various diseases from the fans, which he believed irreparably damaged his entire career.
Vince was always good to me. I mean, even when I went to him and told him I wanted out, you know, obviously some of the things that happened and the way they were using me, I wasn't happy with, but I don't know if he was directly involved with that or not. But I just, like I said, I treat people the way they treat me. And he always treated me well, so.
I remember meeting McMahon. I remember meeting Vince, and I remember seeing him backstage. I remember seeing him when he was in a good mood, gregarious. I'm not saying he's a hugger, but he's definitely going up to, Taker, Rock, Austin, or whatever. And I didn't notice that they were avoiding him. I didn't notice that people were not getting close to him. And again, just like earlier, I don't know if he's a germaphobe. Maybe he is. Maybe he doesn't like people sneezing or touching him, which, if he is, I'm shocked he decided to start a company where he's got people around him all the time.
I wake up in the morning every day and I feel totally fine with who I am as a person. But I can't imagine what it'd be like waking up every day and looking in the mirror and being Vince McMahon.
Like, how do you look at yourself? How do you look at the mirror? I mean, obviously he's got problems, He's a sexual deviant, He needs help. He's not well.
There were various reports of bullying in the locker room, but some believed that this was like boot camp to teach respect, though some, like Chris Benoit, had other plans. On some occasions, he angrily kicked The Miz out of the locker room and forced him to eat in the corridors for months. But in April 2006, things began to get worse. Brian Mailhart was portraying the Palmer Cannon character when, during a European tour, he was tied up in the showers by Chris Benoit and John Bradshaw Layfield, before being tormented for around 6 hours, including threats of rape, and nobody in the locker room stepped in to stop it. Not long after, Mailhart handed in his notice and abruptly left the WWE. Unfortunately, we would later find out what Benoit was truly capable of. On the weekend of June the 22nd to the 24th in 2007, WWE wrestler Chris Benoit, who had previously been charged of domestic abuse against his wife Nancy, murdered her, their 7-year-old son Daniel, and then committed suicide in his home in Atlanta, Georgia. Upon the autopsy, it was concluded that his brain was the equivalent of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient, putting into question the treatment of the wrestlers and their safety over the years in regards to head trauma.
But I think everybody would agree, and the schedule has changed now, they were running people into the ground. Nobody should be working 52 weeks a year. Nobody. They shouldn't be having new shows 52 weeks a year. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And everybody inside WWE says it. They just don't want to admit it. But no company should work that way.
Though only speculation, the direct motive of Benoit's actions remain a mystery. Steroids were also found inside the home, and despite the previous drug scandal, upon examination, around 40% of the wrestlers on the current roster tested positive for drugs, most of which were steroids. But both Vince and Linda testified over the drug use and claimed that they were all illegally prescribed.
Well, when police got to the home, they found Chris Benoit's body, his wife's body, and his child's body. They also found steroids in the home. And when asked by reporters if the steroids could have played any part in the murder-suicide, the DA, Scott Ballard, said, quote, "We don't know yet. This is one of the things that we'll be looking at." And yet, almost immediately after, the WWE comes out with a statement saying steroids, quote, "were not and could not be related to the cause of death." How could you possibly know that? The toxicology reports are out. They're not going to come back for several weeks. So how can you so definitively say steroids played no part?
Well, we didn't say that. In essence,
That's a quote.
Well, I understand it. Our reaction, by the way, was reacting to the hysteria of the media, which quite naturally they want to get to the bottom of this, as we do.
But Mr. McMahon, the quote is steroids were not and could not be related to the cause of death. That's very specific.
It's very specific, but it was relating to the word rage because of the steroid rage that everyone was using. And obviously this is not an act of rage. It's an act of deliberation when you do something like this over 3 days. It's not an act of rage, be it steroid rage or roid rage, whatever it's called, or any other rage. That's what we were referring to. There's no way, quite frankly, that we and or the media, it's all speculation until the toxicology reports come back. It's all speculation.
But because it's all speculation, I'm guessing, why were you so clear in saying you did not believe that steroids played a part? Steroids are found in the house again. Right. He has a history of violence by his own wife's account. And steroid use can also cause depression and paranoia, and that can also lead people to do crazy things. It doesn't have to be rage alone.
Right. I agree with that. There were a number of prescription medications as well found in the house, and whether or not they had anything to do with this behavior, who knows, or whether or not there were other aspects involved in his life that had something to do with this behavior. Hopefully we can find out in some way. This has been so devastating as a father and a grandfather and a father figure to all those associated with our brand. This is not what we're about. What we're about is putting smiles on people's faces. This is the opposite of what we do. We're entertainers. We entertain people all over the world, and we put smiles on faces. That's our job description, not something like this to be tainted and smeared with this. It's no different than if you're a postal worker. You still use the post office, but obviously there's been problems there too. There are problems everywhere. There was no indication whatsoever that this man could possibly turn into this monster and do what he did.
But there's long been a history of suspected steroid use when it comes to pro wrestlers. How do you police these wrestlers?
Well, the way we do it now, back in February of last year, we instituted a wellness policy that not only polices steroids, but prescription drugs, or I should say the abuse of prescription drugs.
Is that just essentially blood tests that you administer? Or?
No, it's a urine test, blood test, things of that nature to determine all these factors, as well as we instituted as well a cardiovascular aspect. In terms of heart disease or heart failure. So it's a very comprehensive test. It was put into place back in February. And the last test that Chris Benoit took of a random nature was in April, which he was totally negative.
I've talked to a lot of people now in the last number of days about wrestling. And apparently, most people behind the scenes are telling me it's a little known secret. Steroid use is fairly rampant. You willing to admit that?
Well, I mean, Benoit's a physician, just got indicted on charges for...
I didn't ask you that. Do you know of widespread steroid use in wrestling?
Oh, steroids are used throughout the industry all the way through. I mean, it's easier to say or point out the number of guys that aren't doing steroids than those that are.
Did you ever use steroids, and is there such a thing as roid rage?
I did use steroids, but I've been open about it from the very beginning. I don't have to go back in time and cover something up or a lie that I told before. I've been open and I've been candid about it, but there's a difference between use and abuse. And different than the other crybaby former talent from professional wrestling or other professional sports, I don't have any whining and complaining to do. I'm not broken down. I have a healthy.
If you're saying there's a difference between use and abuse,
I think it is
I would
the point.
argue.
The point.
I would argue that any use is abuse if you don't need it for medical reasons.
I think that there are sacrifices that professional athletes at that level will choose to make to succeed at the business that they participate in. And I don't think that people, when you talk about roid rage for me is a pie-in-the-sky theory that's thought up by people that have no business discussing the frame of mind of an elite physical athlete.
But that's not the point. Look, I understand your desire to be number one in your field.
No, the point is you're trying to say overall that taking steroids is bad, and I don't think it is.
You don't think it is?
Taking steroids, no, I don't.
This sparks more speculation about the wrestler's well-being and the company's drug policy. Due to these tragic events, Vince decided to erase Benoit's name from existence, and the company wouldn't acknowledge him going forward. In July 2008, it would only continue as Vince decided to take the company into a more PG-oriented direction. He admitted that they had no competition anymore, so they didn't need to appeal to viewers the same way as they did in the past. So he wanted to go in a more script-based direction and focus more on storytelling, so the company could be more appealing to corporate sponsors. They also banned any potentially dangerous moves that may injure the head due to the Benoit tragedy, including the pile driver or unprotected chair shots to the face, risking possible brain damage. Though Andrew Martin, who wrestled under the name Test, would pass away on March the 13th, 2009 after an accidental overdose, and upon examination he suffered the same brain damage issues as Benoit 2 years earlier. On September the 16th, 2009, Linda McMahon actually resigned as CEO of the WWE after nearly 30 years with the business to focus on her political career, running for Republican Senate for Connecticut, though she did still remain minority owner of the WWE. On October the 16th, a month later, her son Shane followed suit, handing in his own resignation.
Having been associated with this organization for the majority of my life, I feel this is the opportune time in my career to pursue other ventures.
Though years later it was speculated that he was actually becoming estranged from his father at this point, and he wanted to distance himself from his behavior. On April the 7th, 2011, the WWE opted to stop using the full name of World Wrestling Entertainment and decided to just focus more on the entertainment factor and not the sport directly, launching the online streaming service, the WWE Network, in February 3 years later.
The reason I'm leaving is you people, because after I'm gone, you're still gonna pour money into this company. I'm just a spoke on the wheel. The wheel's gonna keep turning, and I understand that. But Vince McMahon's gonna make money to spite himself. He's a millionaire who should be a billionaire. You know why he's not a billionaire? It's because he surrounds himself with glad-handing, nonsensical yes men like John Laurinaitis, who's gonna tell him everything that he wants to hear. And I'd like to think that maybe this company will be better after Vince McMahon's dead, but the fact is, it's gonna get taken over by his idiotic daughter and his doofus son-in-law and the rest of his stupid family.
In 2017, perhaps due to Rita Chatterton's previous allegations, the WWE actually incorrectly began to promote Jessica Carr as the first ever female referee. Meanwhile, the actual title holder of this claim, Rita, admitted that she was open to returning to the world of professional wrestling, but maintained that she would never work with Vince McMahon again. On January the 25th, 2018, Vince announced that his previously failed XFL would actually be returning. However, it would only last 2 years before again filing for bankruptcy. By 2019, Shane McMahon returned to the WWE, working behind the scenes as a producer, and Vince announced that the company would be taking a new direction, becoming edgier once again, but still remaining PG. The second most successful wrestling company in the world was now All Elite Wrestling, but on July the 29th, 2021, Vince claimed that he didn't consider them competition at all, and that he was not sure what their investments are as far as their talent is concerned. Regardless of this, for 2 years, WWE show NXT went head-to-head with AEW's Dynamite every Wednesday night, and the WWE actually lost in the ratings, being forced to move NXT over to Tuesdays instead. But it was in April 2022 when the company began to face legal issues once again. The WWE board began investigating supposed $3 million hush money settlements that had allegedly been paid to a former WWE employee after she had an affair with Vince himself. This led to other non-disclosure agreements by misconduct being revealed by other women within the company against Vince and executive John Laurinaitis, totaling around $12 million of hush money settlements. Though nothing definitive has been proven, most have speculated that this was Christy Hemme. Possibly in connection to these allegations, on May the 19th, 2022, Stephanie McMahon announced that she was taking a leave of absence from the company. And it was also revealed at this point that Vince and Linda had actually been separated for a while, but still remained married for business purposes. However, on June the 17th, a month later, Vince actually decided to step down as chairman and CEO, naming his daughter the new interim CEO and chairwoman of the company, though Vince would continue to oversee WWE creative and the content development. But just a few days later, on July the 22nd, Vince McMahon, after 40 years of control, announced his retirement from the WWE completely, now naming Stephanie the permanent chairwoman and co-CEO along with Nick Khan, with Stephanie's husband Triple H taking over WWE creative. By October, it was revealed that the company had disclosed around $19.6 million of unrecorded payments from Vince to settle sexual misconduct claims between 2006 and 2022. In December, it was now when Rita Chatterton returned to the public eye. After others had spoken out about their experiences with Vince, she joined the fray and filed a lawsuit against him. McMahon continued to maintain his innocence, but he still paid a settlement out of court to supposedly avoid the cost of litigation. It's rumored that she was looking for a settlement of $11.75 million, but it's unclear how much was actually paid.
If these things were done to me by a 77-year-old man, I wouldn't be looking for a payoff. I would be looking for him to die in prison on criminal charges.
That same month, a different tanning spa worker also filed a lawsuit against Vince, claiming that he had sexually assaulted her in California in 2011. Despite all of this, Vince still dared to appear on WWE television, some calling it a brave move, while others called it completely egotistical, rubbing his horrific actions in the public eye.
I'm here simply to remind you of the 4 words we just saw and what we call the WWE signature. Those 4 words are then, now, forever, and the most important word is together.
Regardless of the controversy, on January the 5th, 2023, Vince McMahon announced that he was actually planning to return to the WWE as the executive chairman, and was even considering selling the company. The following day, he was appointed back to the WWE board of directors, and on the 10th, he returned to his role as chairman, while his daughter Stephanie announced her official resignation from the company, supposedly because of his return. On April the 3rd, 2023, the WWE announced that they would be merging with the UFC to form a new publicly traded company known as TKO, with Vince McMahon serving as executive chairman, owning 34% of the company. However, on October the 15th that year, it was announced that, for unknown reasons, CEO of parent company Endeavor Group Holdings, Ari Emanuel, removed Vince McMahon from WWE creative power and granted 99.9% responsibility of the company to Triple H. Things would only get worse for Vince on January the 25th, 2024, when Janelle Grant, who was an employee of the company in the Stamford, Connecticut headquarters between 2019 to 2022, claimed that Vince coerced her into a sexual relationship, along with John Laurinaitis and a WWE wrestler who was also a former UFC fighter, most believing it to be Brock Lesnar, who allegedly asked for videos of the woman urinating. Though the person's identity remains a mystery, Brock Lesnar was subsequently removed from the upcoming WWE event, the Royal Rumble, and the company seemed to be distancing themselves from him as well. She claimed to have been laid off from work, so she approached the WWE for a job and was forced to accept in exchange for sexual acts in order to provide for her family. She claimed that they had sexually trafficked her and repeatedly sexually assaulted her, being the subject of extreme cruelty and being completely degraded, including Vince McMahon even defecating on her during the acts. She claimed that Vince agreed to pay her $3 million in 2022 to keep it quiet and out of court, but he stopped paying after the first installment due to the other allegations at the time. The next day after this was made public, TKO confirmed that Vince McMahon had officially resigned from the company. Vince McMahon's supposed text messages to the victim were also made public.
I love it. That's you, Janelle. You just can't get enough, can you? In the future, it's going to be so bad that you'll demand to be fucked twice a day and not just with blank in a three-way. Why not let others see the beautiful, voluptuous body and watch you shake uncontrollably when you come? They'll go out of their minds. Then I'll find more friends and we'll tie you up so you're helpless. I'll direct them to have their way any way they want. Who can make you scream the loudest? Maybe I'll just line them up and have them squirt in your mouth, your pussy, all over your tits and ass, all at the same time. You'll be covered in cum and we'll make you eat it all and taste everybody's cum. The next morning, you'll be a little sore, but you're still going to want more. After all that fucking over and over, your last picture. You need your panties ripped off and 3 big black dicks in all 3 holes at the same time. Way up your pussy and way up your ass as far as they will go, but even farther. And the thickest cock goes down your throat, so it makes you gag and convulse as those big black cocks pound away. It feels like from the start you're being assaulted, but it's made you come non-stop. Just one continuous constant orgasm, and just before you pass out, those big black dicks squirt their loads of cum inside you. As you lay on your stomach, the cum is coming out of all your holes. I'll turn you over and jack off all over you. I just passed my phone around to a bunch of guys on the tech crew. They were screaming, "Oh my God, she's fucking beautiful. Look at that ass. I'd like to get that." I paused to count out loud how many guys there were. 12. I then said, "Okay, there's 12 of you, and she would love to fuck each and every one of you at one time." The guys cheered, but she will only do it if she takes 3 at a time. That brought a huge reaction. She wants 1 deep in her ass, 1 way down her throat, and 1 in her pussy. And you can pound her and keep on pounding her till you pop your load. She may scream and try to say no, although it would be difficult to say anything with a cock down her throat. They laughed. I then said, "Listen, no matter what, just pound away till you squirt." Baby, these guys were having a blast with me. Some of them didn't believe me, so I said you were the greatest fuck in the world, and no matter how much you get, you always wanted more. And then I said, "She loves cum." Baby, these techs as we call them, were having the time of their lives listening to my truthful story. I then said you would take a 10-minute break between each fucking knee, but then you would get back on your hands and knees with your ass in the air and say, "Okay, I'm ready. Who's next?" Lol. I drove them wild, baby. Or I should say, you drove them wild. Just imagine if this really happened, baby. How much cum you would have coming out of all your holes. Exactly, baby. He's not the only one. Blank called me this afternoon, begging to eat you and fuck you with his nice and hard dick. I already told him, baby. By the way, Johnny wants Tuesdays, but not this coming one, and the occasional Saturday. But maybe I can shift it to Thursday nights? Johnny would like all of the above. Maybe he wants 2 other guys to join you with him. Holy shit. You've told him you would do anything with him, so if he surprised you with 2 others, you would have no alternative than to take them on. Oh my God, the stories you could tell me then. It makes me want to come right now. By the way, I just thought of what I think is an excellent idea. Maybe you can hint that if he knows someone who can be discreet, it might be better if you and Johnny try him out first so he can get more comfortable before he is introduced to me. Actually, that does make total sense, doesn't it? These compliments will keep on coming, baby. Just wait and see. I totally understand and agree being scared of communication and photos. Johnny gets drunk and sloppy and could easily make a mistake that could cost him his job and yours too. Verbal communication communication is the way to go. That said, have you and Johnny talked about breakfast tomorrow? Here's what Blank said after I told him that part of the deal was fucking you. Lol. That's your turf. She will be ruined after me and leave your ass. Plus, after me, your tool won't fit anymore.
I still probably haven't seen all the pieces, but what I saw was pretty shocking. I can't imagine the Vince McMahon that I know speaking like that person that texted those messages. It seemed like it was coming from a depraved 17-year-old or something to me. So my first thought was, come on, like he really said like all that. And then, I know the belief is that they can prove it and that it's legitimate, credible sources. So it just leaves me a little bit bewildered.
He'll have his day in court, and this thing will play out. But I'm not going to say that this woman, because I don't know her, she could have very easily have been. This could have been a consensual relationship.
I have not, we obviously, everyone is aware of the situation and understands it. And like I said, it's an incredibly sad situation. Look, I can sit here and go like, it sucks, but we have always, again, and I've mentioned it to you all in the past, that, we take that look, I take all of the youth that come through here incredibly serious, because this is, it's a tough line of work regardless of what's going on. Just leaving home and coming here and pursuing your dreams is a big thing that we take incredibly serious here. We understand the young men and women that come through our doors, are impressionable. So we absolutely, certainly encourage the openness and again, telling everybody to please, again, tell us the truth, and let us know how we can help. But that's something that, again, has been here for a long time, and we continue to do our best to improve on that, because it's one of the most important things to me, is to be able to ask those questions, you're afraid to ask. And so we certainly empower them to do that.
And now his legacy is no longer what he has given to the professional wrestling business. Let's be honest, what he's given to all of us, and being a person who literally came from zero to a billionaire. That legacy is not going to be it no more. Now that legacy is going to be Weinstein, it's going to be Cosby, and it's going to be McMahon.
But what's great about him too is that's kind of him. People take him so seriously and stuff like that. He's like a big kid.
And this wasn't a 14-year-old girl that was given a man a hand job for $200 and brought back to her trailer house. Like that was not the situation. So it's like when they start using when she was being groomed, and she was this and she's that, and I'm just like, well, Jesus, like how did she not get out of this?
I mean, Vince is no angel, man. I don't, I mean, obviously I know, and I'm not best friends with him, right? But he's never treated me wrong, and that's just the way it is. I don't have a close relationship with him. I'm not friends with him, but he never treated me badly. So that's where it stays. But to blame somebody for something you're doing to yourself, I don't get it.
I've said to him a million times, like when he'll do something completely outrageous, and I'll say, "You think Bill Gates does this kind of stuff over at Microsoft? You know what I mean? Doing this stuff to his employees? I don't think he does."
Vince is a caring human being, not the monster that people think that he is. I've never taken for granted the special opportunity he gave me. If Vince feels like there's something there, I have a place on the roster, then I had no problem doing it.
Kurt Angle, Drew McIntyre, The Rock and John Cena all defended Vince, calling him a father figure to them. And while Stone Cold Steve Austin has had issues with McMahon in the past, he still claimed to have respected him. But this is not the main consensus. Since the allegations, the WWE have seemingly severed all ties with Vince McMahon, and he seems to be receiving the same treatment that he had put forth to Chris Benoit's name so many years earlier, being erased from the existence of his own creation. While we, wrestling fans and non-wrestling fans alike, can only look at the history of this legendary business, look at the icons over the decades, and look at the evidence and all of the unanswered questions, and continue seeking answers.